European judges on the brink of backing down over deportation flights as the Home Secretary claims Rwanda is ready to take thousands.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock. It's Monday, the 20th of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news this morning, Isabel Braverman has suggested she's close to a breakthrough with the European Court of Human Rights that could see deportation taking off for Rwanda by the summer. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, will bring you an exclusive interview with the Home Secretary.
Boris Johnson will argue today that the inquiry into whether he misled Parliament over lockdown parties is biased and unlawful. The former Prime Minister has submitted new evidence in his defence ahead of a grilling by MPs on Wednesday.
The bank UBS will take over its struggling rival Credit Suisse in a bid to avert a financial crisis. The deal was made just hours before markets opened, with the Bank of England welcoming the takeover.
Donald Trump has urged his supporters to launch mass protests as he reveals he expects to be arrested tomorrow. His former Vice President Mike Pence has come to his defence, claiming any arrest would be politically motivated.
And the Princess of Wales has shared a new photograph of her family to mark Mother's Day. The picture shows Catherine sitting in a tree with her children Louis, George and Charlotte. When was the last time you sat in a tree? Let us know. Maybe you have the picture. Send it to us. All the newspapers have fallen for this today, and it's just like Instagram. It's like putting a picture on Instagram and liking it, but it was obviously taken last summer.
I know, I think it's because it's old, and actually we've seen her in that outfit before, not to be shallow, but I don't feel that excited by it. I like to see, another look, another insight into her life as a mother.
Leaves on the trees, and sun shining, and whatever
Not
it is.
excited.
But anyway, it's on practically every front page
Yeah.
there is this morning. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Your views, very welcome.
So our top story this morning, European judges could be on the brink of backing down on their ruling that prevented migrants being sent to Rwanda.
Now, the Home Secretary said talks with the European Court of Human Rights were constructive, hinting that the first flights could take off before summer.
Well, it follows Ms Braverman's trip to Rwanda's capital, Kigali, where she claimed the country was ready to take thousands of migrants.
Here's an exclusive interview now with GB News, and in it the Home Secretary said Rwanda was a welcoming country which would offer asylum seekers a good life, as our Home and Security editor, Mark White, reports.
Critics have accused the Home Secretary of indulging in nothing more than a glorified photo op. And yes, of course, these are powerful images. But Suella Braverman's visit here is not just about the eye-catching symbolism. The UK government desperately needs the agreement with Rwanda to succeed. Without a third country willing to take relocated asylum seekers, the government's illegal migration bill is almost certain to stumble at the first hurdle. So a meeting with the Rwandan President Paul Kagame was on the agenda as the UK strengthens its partnership agreement. The Home Secretary certainly packed a lot into her two-day schedule, visiting new housing developments and other support services being geared up to accommodate thousands of asylum seekers who may end up here in the months ahead. The plans still have their critics, of course. TV presenter Gary Lineker, opposition politicians and others. But Suella Braverman told me no one should judge unless they've been here. Would you encourage them actually to come here and see for themselves what Rwanda has to offer those who would come here and settle?
Absolutely. I think there has been far too much prejudice, frankly, snobbery amongst the critics, who most of whom haven't even visited Rwanda. This is my third visit to Rwanda. This is a welcoming country. It's a dynamic economy. So to all of those critics who display a gross prejudice against Rwanda, I tell them to visit first and then judge.
An important stop-off for Suella Braverman was this huge tech hub in the capital, Kigali. home to hundreds of startups and companies from around the world. Rwanda is home to a burgeoning tech sector.
The Northern Kigali House in particular has over 200 companies, startups that are stationed out of here, also organizations that support startups, and we have more than 1,000 members. Now, 55% of these are from other African countries.
The Kepler Academy, high in the hills over Kigali, another example, says the Home Secretary, of the many education services Rwanda can provide asylum seekers. This well-established, well-respected local university has already committed to ensuring up to 25% of the students enrolled here will be refugees. But like the many housing complexes around this capital city, they have absolutely no idea just how many people they'll eventually be asked to accommodate. For in truth, the Home Secretary doesn't even know how many asylum seekers may eventually have to be sent here. It could be many thousands, but Home Office officials are quietly hoping that just like the Australian initiative against the small boats, once they finally start relocating asylum seekers, the people smugglers' business model will be broken. It's a big gamble, and this country is a vital component. Mark White, GB News, in the Rwandan capital, Kigali.
There was more with the Home Secretary, a full exclusive interview from Mark White with her 9:30 today on the station.
Right, well, joining us now to discuss this more is social policy analyst Dr. Rakib Ehsan. Good morning to you. Lots of the headlines of the newspapers running with this. The Sun, Euro judges cave in on migrants. Just explain to us why there might be a different take on this from the ECHR.
Well, I'll be honest, Isabel, I'm not entirely sure. I'll believe it when I see it. That the UK-Rwanda migration partnership continues to be mired in legal challenges. And I think that the reason why I'm quite sceptical is because as it stands, not a single person has been transferred from the UK to Rwanda under this migration partnership. So I remain somewhat cynical. And until there is even just a single flight which carries any amount of people from the UK to Rwanda under the migration partnership, then I really have to question how effective this particular approach will be when it comes to tackling the small boats emergency that we see on the English South Coast.
So she's talking it all up, is she?
Well, I think that's the risk, Eamonn. What the Conservative Party is doing is they're obviously ramping up the salience of the issue of illegal immigration. But as we've seen in the last few years, they haven't tackled it particularly well. They introduced the Nationality and Borders Act. That seemed to achieve very little. So now we have the new illegal migration bill. There are concerns there that it's not compatible with our international obligations. So we have to see how that bill progresses. And I think in terms of the UK-Rwanda migration partnership, I can't help but feel that it may well be bogged down by further legal challenges.
It's going to be, a challenge is going to be heard in the Court of Appeal next month, isn't it? So we'll find out. But the Prime Minister a couple of weeks ago at pains to point out that actually, unequivocally, they had won in the last round in the court. So who knows what will happen at appeal stage. What about the argument that actually, because this is primary legislation, the ECHR are more likely to take a hands-off approach?
It's a possibility. It's a possibility that the ECHR may not be so interventionist. But there also remains the possibility that if the ECHR looks at particular provisions in the illegal migration bill, the Home Secretary herself talking about the possibility of those who may claim to be victims of modern slavery being relocated to Rwanda, then there is, of course, the chance that the ECHR may well intervene and deem these new laws to be unlawful. And then there would be a very serious problem. Isabel, I've made the point that away from the UK-Rwanda migration partnership, what the UK needs to focus on are comprehensive returns agreements with countries such as France and Albania. Albania is designated as a safe state in the illegal migration bill, so that would help to facilitate the process of people being returned back to Albania. And on top of that, there needs to be greater cooperation with our Western European partners, especially France, when it comes to dismantling those people smuggling frameworks.
Very similar to the position that Labour are taking. Lisa Nandy on Camilla Tominey's show yesterday. Let's have a listen to what she had to say.
We think it's absurd. The Home Secretary has handed over £140 million in cheques to Rwanda and so far has nothing to show for it. This was a plan that was announced and pushed by her predecessor, Priti Patel. They've announced and re-announced it, and today what we've got is an Instagram account rather than a workable policy. We think you should take that money, put it into the National Crime Agency, create a cross-border cell that disrupts the criminal gangs, and send the clearest possible message to those criminal gangs that their behaviour won't be tolerated and that will bring them to account should they persist. Instead, we've had more and more of the tough talk from this government, and last year the boat crossings hit a record high of 45,000. It's not working, and it's about time the government recognised that.
Let's move on to another subject, Dr. Ashan. I am hoping, beyond hope, that as a social policy analyst, you will have a view on the idea that on St George's Day, Sunday, April 23rd, your mobile phone will vibrate in your pocket and sound an alarm as a test to reach all of us that there's some impending danger around us. This absolutely fascinates me. In terms of social policy, how much of this is about control?
I think that in terms of the, are you referring to this emergency alert? I take it. Yeah. I only heard about it yesterday. I'm not entirely sure about the general what is the general purpose behind this emergency alert. I'm not sure how much of this is about government control, trying to keep people on their toes. To be honest, Eamonn, I think I'll have to read more into it before I'm convinced that it's actually a good idea and that it's an idea that ranks highly when it comes to practicality. I'm yet to be convinced.
Look, I'm with you. I mean, I'm scratching my head at this one, and I'm thinking there's only two reasons why they would want to buzz your phone and make us all aware. One is nuclear attack, and the second is alien invasion. So, is there something, you see, I sit here and I think, everybody laughs about this, but why does somebody want to ring my phone without me asking for it?
It's commonly used in the States, in the Netherlands.
Commonly.
Well, they do actually buzz people's phones whenever there's a hurricane coming, or in the case of COVID, there were lots of advice given through these
when do you think the next
soundings.
hurricane will hit us?
Oh, yeah, I don't know what the reason is here, but I guess it's just, post-pandemic precautions.
No, it's because they think they're going to be nuclear missiles fired from Russia, or they're aware of something, or they're aware that there has been an alien invasion. We have to point out we don't know that. But what we also don't know is why Downing Street want to do this, and I'm just putting the question out there. So, Doctor, thank you very much indeed. Dr. Ashan is a social policy analyst. Very interesting talking to you, my friend. I hope we speak to you again. Thank you very much. Now, if you've got a view as to why they want to ring the phone in your pocket and alert and scare the bejesus out of all of us, let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Because, look, if there's a forest fire in Surrey or a flood in Aberdeen, why do I care? Why do I care? If it's, if I live in Belfast.
Well, I know
Coventry,
that they've trialled this on a regional level, so presumably they can just apply it in the areas that they want to. So, for example, if there is flooding in your area, maybe this will sound the alarm, wake you up. Of all the things
that this government has got to spend money on, they think a vibrating phone going off
we'd all
in your
complain
pocket
if we didn't get advance warning.
with an alarm, a siren going off, bringing us back to the days of the Second World War. They think unless, this is what I say, unless there is something that they are worried about. Let us know your thoughts on this. Over to you, Isabel.
Boris Johnson is set to face a grilling this week over comments he made to Parliament about lockdown parties in Downing Street.
Well, he submitted evidence in his defence which will be published today, and it claims the inquiry is unlawful and biased. Let's get the view now of the Deputy Political Editor of HuffPost UK, Sophia Slay. Sophia, good to see you.
Good morning.
Unlawful and biased.
It sounds like Boris Johnson is going to come out swinging today. We expect to get his evidence this afternoon. Well, this dossier, I think they're calling it the sort of defence dossier. And there's been a lot of quotes that have gone out over the weekend in the papers from Team Boris, sort of saying this is the bombshell evidence. This is going to exonerate the former Prime Minister and show that he didn't mislead or lie to Parliament. And that's what this whole investigation, this whole committee is going to be probing on Wednesday. They think it might last up to 4 hours, this interrogation in Parliament by the committee of MPs. And I think, Boris Johnson has had a long time to get on the front foot of these allegations, right? He's got a top KC representing him. And I don't think it's going to be easy to sort of back the former Prime Minister into a corner, to be honest.
Well, his whole political career will be riding on it. So, as you say, he's going to be investing time into the detail and all of this. But just bring us up to date on where we are, because it wasn't that long ago they published a report which concluded that he had misled Parliament on 4 occasions. So what then, is this his chance to sort of defend himself, take the dock, as it were?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is his chance to defend himself in front of MPs. I mean, this is kind of sort of a trial by MPs. And basically, if this committee, the Privileges Committee, decide that he did mislead Parliament, that then they sort of make a recommendation about, perhaps how long he should be suspended for. That then goes to the Commons and they get to vote on it. They can either adopt the recommendation or reject it. And Rishi Sunak has said to his Tory MPs, you can have a free vote.
Which says something in itself.
A clever manoeuvre, I think, from Rishi Sunak to just hands off, not my problem. And they will decide, what punishment he gets. If it's a severe punishment, so say more than 10-day suspension, he could face a recall petition, which could ultimately end up in him, facing a by-election in his constituency.
Just explain why that would be then. What is a recall petition?
It's basically sort of a number of his constituents have to sign, have to sort of lend their signatures to say that to call for a by-election, and then it's sort of triggered. Okay. Whether or not we get to that set stage, I'd be surprised. It seems like a tall order to get to, given that he's had months, he's got this big defence dossier, and his team seem really confident that he is going to scrape through.
And what do we think is this new evidence that's going to be submitted? Because apparently it's new WhatsApp messages.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of the messages are going to come from, I think they've named sort of his director of communications at the time, who was a political appointment, and it sounds like what they're going to argue, I mean, we haven't seen them yet, but from what's been sort of briefed, is it's going to be, Boris Johnson made his statements to Parliament on the basis of what his advisors were telling him. So a lot of the time he went into the Commons and said, I've been assured that there were no parties in Downing Street. And I think he's going to sort of say, well, on good faith, I took what my advisors were telling me, and that's the information that I brought to the Commons. I never meant to sort of mislead you. I didn't knowingly, I didn't do it on purpose, but this is what my team told me.
Although he was found to have been overheard saying this was the most unsocially distanced gathering, and these new pictures emerged. So I do find that hard to make that leap.
Yeah.
I heard some people describing it over the weekend as kind of like trying to convince people the sky was a different colour. Yeah. Are we going to hear sort of the sublime to the ridiculous this week?
I think so. I mean, I think you're going to really get down into the sort of the minute detail of what each word means. I mean, I think it's going to be 4 hours. I mean, there'll be some explosive moments, but some really, really painful moments as well. And I think on that point, I think the MPs are going to really, really try and skewer him on that because, you can plead ignorance all you like, but at the end of the day, that's where you lived, that's where you worked, they were your staff. How did you not know what was going on in your backyard? And also, week after week, month after month, you were the man telling us what the guidance was, telling us what the rules were, telling us how we should live our lives, and yet you didn't know what was going on under your own nose. So I think they will be pointing out the kind of absurdness of that.
He needed an emergency warning alert on his phone to let him know what was going on. So this is the big political theatre of the week. We're going to hear this all week.
grab the popcorn.
And actually interesting that, according to The Eye, Rishi Sunak has just shelved all policy making for the week because he just knows the headline's going to be dominated by this.
100%. I mean, when the Boris show rolls into town, it is all about Boris Johnson. I mean, love him or loathe him, I really don't mind what your view is of him. That's totally up to you. But what I will say as a journalist is the man is a news machine. He produces... People are interested in him because they either love him or loathe him. They've got an opinion on him.
It's going to be news theatre this week. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you for your opinion, Sophia. Appreciate it. 19 minutes, 20 coming up if we wait 3 seconds. 2, 1, 0. It's exactly 6:20. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. And the Home Secretary has said she's prepared to change the law to expel rogue officers in the Metropolitan Police. Suella Braverman acknowledged it's very difficult for chief constables to get rid of officers who she says fall short.
UBS will take over its rival Credit Suisse in a bid to avert a financial crisis. A deal worth more than £2.5 billion has been welcomed by the Bank of England.
Talking point for you this morning, an emergency alert will be sent to mobile users across Britain next month to test a new public warning system. It's to make people aware of potentially life-threatening situations, including flooding and wildfires. The siren-like alert will be sent on the 23rd of April, which is St George's Day, and users won't be able to use their phones until they acknowledge it. So, how do they have your number? What do they do? No, it's all... Why do you not see this as a serious breach of personal
We all got texts, didn't we, during lockdown about various things?
Did we?
I seem to recall, or I made that up. I feel like my phone's definitely been used before.
So they can infiltrate your phone, they can invalidate your phone until you reply to the text message. How creepy is all of that? And we talk about China being able to control your mobile devices. But anyway, I can't talk about this any longer because I'll probably be
I'm seeing lots of emails coming in, don't worry.
Are you? What?
Well, I haven't pre-read them, so it's always dangerous. I think this will cause mass hysteria if there was ever a nuclear attack. I think that's true. If there was a genuine, oh my goodness, a missile's been launched, here's the buzzer going off, it would just create anarchy. It'd be better probably not to know. Other people saying, how do they have our numbers? So lots of thoughts on this.
And they control your phone afterwards. You can't use your phone till you acknowledge their number. Don't like it. Don't like it. GBviews at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GBnews. To Scotland now, it's been a turbulent few days for the SNP. Today, Nicola Sturgeon is on Loose Women. But that's not the main news. She'll also take part in her last official visit in office, opening an NHS treatment centre.
And with the health service in Scotland in a critical condition, whoever takes over a week from now will face a major challenge to protect it. Our Scotland reporter Tony Maguire has more.
We're just days away from finding out who will serve as Scotland's next First Minister, and alongside them, a new Health Secretary will face the monumental task of repairing a national health service that's stretched to breaking point. NHS Scotland continues to buckle under the post-pandemic backlog, and weary healthcare professionals are rapidly losing faith in their ability to sufficiently treat the population. 65% of A&E patients waiting beyond the 4-hour target, more than 6,000 unfilled posts across Scotland, dentists reducing NHS treatment or walking away altogether. Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar believes that the very survival of the NHS is at risk in Scotland.
We have a National Health Service that was challenged pre the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic has exacerbated a problem, but we shouldn't pretend it created the problem. On every single measure, our NHS is weaker now than it was even a year ago, never mind 3 years ago. Now 770,000 people on an NHS waiting list. Our CAM stats, the worst that they have ever been. Our A&E stats, the worst they've ever been. Our cancer waiting times, the worst they have ever been. And right now we've got a government that wants to put its head in the sand rather than confront that big crisis facing our NHS.
That crisis is forcing NHS dentistry to the brink of collapse. More than half of Scottish dentists have already reduced their NHS treatment, with 83% planning further service reductions over the coming year. Chairman of the Scottish Dental Practice Owner Group, Dr Ataf Bashir, says it's time for the Scottish Government to do more than just pay lip service to their concerns.
The first thing that needs to happen is we need to go from a disease-centred model to a preventative-centred model. So that's the first thing. They need to start to listen to the profession and then take action based upon what the feedback is. But certainly what the feedback is unanimously is that this current system needs to change because it's not fit for the Scottish people.
Let's be clear, the NHS is not beyond repair. In fact, the last few years there's been many a story which paints the service in a good light. We saw the Scottish Government oversee the fastest COVID vaccine rollout in the UK, and they acted quickly to resolve a pay dispute with doctors and nurses to avoid any industrial action. It's just that right now, poor performance outweighs those achievements, and there's a growing sentiment that both patients and staff deserve better. So whoever emerges as First Minister, the pressure will be on from day one to drastically improve the way healthcare is managed here in Scotland.
Let's go to Tony Live now. More on what's next for the SNP. Miss Sturgeon goes. Her husband's going as well.
Hello, yes, certainly. Quite a disastrous few days for the SNP. As you heard just there, you know, I'd planned to maybe bring the viewers a different aspect of Scottish politics this week. New week, last week before the new leader is chosen. And then over the weekend, or the last few days at least, 3 major resignations and a 30% drop in membership. Certainly has not been a good few days for the SNP. So certainly one of Nicola Sturgeon's senior aides was handed her resignation in after it emerged that she had been helping one of the candidates, Hamza Yousaf, on his campaign. And then Murray Foote, the media chief at the SNP, he resigned after it emerged that he had, in good faith, issued false membership statistics to the press. And then, of course, under increasing pressure, Peter Murrell stepped down as well. So it begs the question, the 3 candidates who are vying to lead this party, are they even going to be leading the same party as when they joined this contest? It's going to be another interesting week for the SNP in Scotland.
Tony?
Thank you. Right, still to come, Donald Trump says he expects to be arrested tomorrow. He's called for mass protests from his supporters. We'll have all the latest for you.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So the emergency alert warning due on April 23rd, which is a Sunday, when your phone will vibrate and a siren noise will go off as well. Andy says, I live in Germany. We have had this twice so far. Countries in the continent use this. It's for disaster warnings. What disasters are we facing, I wonder? Bev says, sending all mobile phones an alarm isn't sinister, but freezing all those phones until you acknowledge it is.
Alison in Cornwall says, I've switched the alert option off. The government don't get to hijack my phone and then lock it till I respond. I didn't know you could switch them off. You live and learn.
The time coming up to 6:30, still to come on the programme this morning.
Today, believe it or not, is the first day of spring, and with the brighter mornings and warmer days comes, unfortunately, allergies. So at 6:45, we'll be finding out the best ways to fight back against hay fever.
As the Prime Minister prepares to launch his antisocial behaviour strategy, we'll ask a former advisor to Tony Blair what can be learnt from the age of the Isabel.
Or what can you learn not to do? Because they were such a disaster, weren't they?
Maybe you can tell us if they were a disaster or not. GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GBnews.
OK, to the States now. Donald Trump has urged his supporters to launch mass protests after he revealed he expects to be arrested tomorrow.
His former Vice President, Mike Pence, came to his defence yesterday. He said any arrest would be politically motivated.
Someone who knows more about presidential wrongdoings than most of us is Steve Gill, who worked under both the Clinton and the Bush administrations. Good morning to you. Right, first of all, if this actually happens, if President Trump is indicted, would he become the first ever president to face criminal charges?
Yes, he would, and President or former Vice President Pence is exactly right. This is the worst, most outrageous form of partisan political persecution we've ever seen. Keep in mind that we have both state law and federal law in the U.S. The federal law that this partisan Democrat DA, who actually ran for office in New York, claiming he would go after Trump, is trying to pursue. The federal claim was investigated by the feds, appointed by President Biden. They declined to prosecute because the case was so weak. The statute of limitations is 2 years, and this happened 7 years ago. So there are huge problems on the federal side. And on the state side that this DA is prosecuting, it's just a misdemeanor if they prove it. And his star witnesses are the Stormy Daniels woman who had to pay Trump $385,000 after she lost her defamation case against him because her claims were outrageous and he proved they were untrue. And her lawyer, who had to go to jail for fraud and tax evasion, those are the star witnesses for the prosecution. This is outrageous political persecution, and I think ultimately this case is only about getting the headline Trump arrested to get a mugshot of Trump so that they can please the anti-Trumpers. And they're gleeful today, but I think this will backfire on them in the end.
Well, but Steve, couldn't it backfire on Trump, this call to, for people to, mass protest, come out on the streets again? Is this not January 6th all over again?
Well, I think that's how the left will paint it. But I think what he's calling for is protest against this political persecution. And just like when you look at what he actually said on January 6th, he wasn't inciting a revolution on that day, nor is he inciting violence today. But I would agree with you, Eamonn. I would tone down the rhetoric. I would encourage the president to tone down the rhetoric, take a different stance on this, encourage people to speak up and speak out, but just keep emphasizing in a peaceful way, because it'll be contorted and twisted if anything happens, as that he encouraged this along. So if I was advising President Trump today, I would say just tone the rhetoric down a little bit.
Look, you've explained that you think this is politically motivated and you think that the legal case is weak. But just for anyone who's coming to this new, just explain what the allegations are, because this all revolves around alleged hush money given to a porn star before the 2016 election.
Yeah, the allegation is that they paid about $130,000 to settle any claim and to silence her, basically. But of course, corporations and others have done the same thing to deal with harassment cases. Keep in mind, former President Bill Clinton paid $835,000 to Paula Jones to settle her harassment case. You have had other cases that settled to again try to stop the attack, stop the publicity. So this is not something that's uncommon that others have done. And this is really, I think, about a distraction. You've got Hunter Biden has not been prosecuted for his crimes. We now learn that $1 million was paid from China to other Biden family members for apparently nothing. The Russia hoax was actually tied to a dossier that Hillary Clinton's campaign paid $130,000 or $40,000 for, and they covered it up as, quote, legal expenses. So ultimately, what this case is about is not paying a settlement or paying off a claim by someone. It's about listing it as a legal fee rather than a payoff to this woman.
Okay.
But that's exactly what Hillary did.
Yeah, but, you say it's politically motivated and it will be all driven by the Democrats. But could this not actually be a good thing for Trump? I mean, Elon Musk came out over the weekend and said if he is actually charged, he'll win by a landslide election next year.
Yeah, I think he wins the Republican primary. For Trump supporters, these are people that would crawl over cracked glass on asphalt in August right now. This will just amplify that. They're going to be even more supportive. And you're already seeing attacks against Ron DeSantis, the most likely Republican primary opponent that could actually defeat Trump in a primary. He's already being attacked for being quiet and not coming to Trump's defense. So I think this easily helps Trump in a Republican primary, but I don't think it really helps him in the general election where he already has problems with suburban women, young voters, libertarian voters. The challenge for Trump is, can he win the general election? This will help him in a primary. I don't think it helps him at all in a general election.
Steve, leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Good talking to you. 25 to 7 is the time. After the break, we'll be discussing the Home Secretary's plan to combat toxic culture within the Met Police. Charlie Rowley, Nikki Hodgson having their say next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, The People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
And on this Monday morning, your front pages look like this.
Here's the Sun. It says European judges are caving in on migrants as the Home Secretary reaches a deal on Rwanda flights.
The Mail covers that Rwanda story as well. It also features a photograph of the Princess of Wales with her 3 children for Mother's Day, which was yesterday. But why let that spoil the fact that they can use...
Beautiful picture.
Well, it's not a beautiful picture. It's an Instagram picture. It's like, there's it again, as you get fed up looking at it. Yeah.
Here's the Telegraph.
They're all up a tree. There
Indeed.
we go.
They say city jobs are under threat as cut-price Credit Suisse sales staves off a financial meltdown. We're talking about that lots throughout the course of the programme. 5,000 people employed by Credit Suisse here in the City of London.
Well, it is cut price. It went from 80 billion or something to 2 billion. There we go. Times. says that the toxic Metropolitan Police Force faces being broken up as it's given an ultimatum to fix widespread failings.
And joining us to go through the headlines this morning in more detail is the former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
And the author, Nikki Hodgson, who we welcome back, who's just given birth 4.5 weeks ago. And I still find it extraordinary that you're here.
Oh, bless you.
Absolute hero. So, listen, welcome both of you. Charlie, let's start with the Express.
Hold on. Have you got an emergency alert on your phone? Have you? Hi. So what do you think of emergency alerts? We're talking about this morning.
Well, I heard you earlier on saying that obviously there might be people across the country that get alarmed by the messages. Nobody ever messages me anymore anyway, so I'd be quite welcome of a text or some sort of notification. But it's, on the serious point, it's, I think it's important to make sure that if there is an emergency of any description, whether it's severe flooding, whether there's a terrorist attack, whether there is something that people in a particular locality need to be aware of, getting a government alert.
Will it go to the particular locality or is it a blanket alert?
Well, this will be a blanket alert on the 23rd of April.
So if it's flooding in Cornwall, why do I need to know about it in Belfast?
Well, I think if it is flooding in Cornwall, only people in Cornwall will get that alert. But I think on the 23rd of April, it will just be a blanket sort of message that gets sent out because it's only been trialled in a couple of areas. And so this is the first time that it will be rolled out right across the UK.
So what do they know that we don't? Have we got nuclear missiles?
Yes.
Have aliens landed? What is it?
Well, I think it's just in any event that we might not even be able to think of.
Look, of all the things the government have got to spend money on, they're prioritising this. Come on.
Well, it's something that's been, I think, long in the making, and I don't know actually. I don't know how much it costs. I'll certainly look into that. But you know, the government is spending £6 million a day on hostels and hotels for people that are coming into this country for Rwanda. It's signed a £140 million deal with Rwanda to deport people and to process people that are coming into this country illegally. So a lot of money is being spent in lots of different areas, but I think when it comes to alerting the public of a national emergency, it's not a bad thing to invest in.
Perhaps bring us into line with lots of other countries as well. You could almost argue we're behind on that. Since you mentioned...
Not lots of other countries.
Well, we've just heard this morning Germany, the Netherlands, States.
But these are not lots of other countries.
Well, they're pretty significant.
There's three countries around the world, and they're used for missing people in the USA, which sounds fine enough, but I just don't believe that this is just an innocent, let's test it and see if it works.
I feel the same. It made me think about, you know, actually, when Orson Welles was on the radio many years ago and did the War of the Worlds broadcast and panicked everybody. OK, a little bit different. That was definitely fiction. But isn't it very viable that this is to do with war? I mean, what else? What else is it to do with? Surely it's to do with the prospect of war.
Totally agree with you. And they can't be honest enough to say it.
I think so, yeah.
We're not all stupid. Is it going to send us all into panic if we...
Well, that's the worry, isn't it? You know, sometimes these things do more the harm than good, you know, than an announcement at the time that something actually happens. So, let's see.
OK. Sorry, you were saying?
Yeah. You wanted to talk about, well, we've chosen it as the Express, Rwanda plan, Eurocorp could be backing down. And we were talking to a social policy analyst about this, and there's some suggestion this could be to do with the idea that this is primary legislation. That means actually the ECHR might not feel that they can block it. Is that your reading of it?
It is, and I think there's something called Rule 39, which prevented the one flight last summer of taking off to Rwanda because of the challenge in the courts. That's something that the government wants to overcome, and it's part of the visit, the two-day visit that the Home Secretary is currently undertaking, I should say, in Rwanda, in order to ensure that the policy that Rishi Sunak has made as one of his 5 priorities for this country, not just dealing with the economy, dealing with the NHS, but also stopping the small boats. It's a #1 priority for him. So making sure that this policy can get off the ground, if I can put it like that, is something that will be crucial to him and the government and their success if they're going to go on and try and win the next general election.
Just explain to us, I think I understand what you mean by primary policy, but can you explain to people who may not know what you're talking about what primary policy is?
Well, primary legislation is the mechanism by which... It would essentially just mean you need to change the law. So currently in the UK, we don't have laws that are strong enough in order to make this policy work. That's why a flight has not left the UK. That's why the UK has not been able to deport anybody to Rwanda. And it's only because the UK legislation in the UK is not strong enough, which is why it's been blocked by the European Court. So having this conversation that the Home Secretary seems to be taking place over the last couple of days is a step in the right direction if this policy is going to work. Of course, there's many sceptics about the policy, whether it's right or wrong, whether it's actually going to work. And Theresa May herself criticised it last week because she said that it would not actually stop people coming into the country.
What do you think?
Well, I think it's. I think Theresa is right. I think if anybody wants to try and come into the UK illegally, you won't be able to stop them. But what the Rwanda policy does is act as a deterrent to. Hopefully, as your report, I think it was Mark Wright, your security, absolutely brilliantly articulated earlier on, it's breaking up those criminal gangs, it's stopping that trade of putting people on boats and sending them to the country in the first place, if you know that you're going to be deported to Rwanda. And of course, when you get to Rwanda, you'll be processed there, and there are opportunities in education, as the Home Secretary is trying to outline over there, as opposed to being in this country.
But there's a contradiction, isn't there, Charlie, about how, you know, Rwanda is seen as, well, we are told by the government it's a safe place, it's a place of opportunity, and yet people don't want to end up there. So do you see that? I mean, do you see that contradiction? What I'm trying to say is it's not desirable, actually, to end up in Rwanda, whatever the government say.
No, well, people want to come to this country, that's why they try and enter illegally.
Absolutely.
But the UK simply can't cope with, and as the reports are saying today, you know, the UK is spending $6 million a day on hotel accommodation and costs. But the whole point of Rwanda is to make sure that actually you can accommodate and help those that are really seeking refuge and those that are in need to be supported in the UK.
In a place which is not proven to be safe.
But the point of the Rwanda policy is to make sure that the UK is able to accommodate people that do need refuge in this country and are able to stay in the UK, and it is making sure that those that don't have a claim are not allowed to stay in this country and we deported to Rwanda.
There will, I suppose, be some who think that the choice of Rwanda as the safe third country could be the undoing of this particular element of the plan, of Swellers' plan. I mean, I know they're talking to some countries in South America, and you wonder if perhaps, I mean, they haven't done the deal with them, but that might have been easier. And Michaela Wrong, who we've had on this programme before, she's written books on Rwanda, she said over the weekend, the timing is grotesque. Rwanda's on the brink of all-out war. Braverman is validating the African leader widely recognised to be responsible for the destabilisation of the African Great Lakes.
OK, right, that's that. Now let's move on to the Eye. And they have a fear, Nikki, that there are a lot of key government decisions going to be made this week, but not announced because of Partygate.
Yes, if you were Rishi Sunak, you'd be quite cheesed off that your predecessor was still taking up so much space, wouldn't you, in the political world, and certainly in the papers. And what this is basically saying is that Rishi Sunak is actually running out of time to deliver some key policies because of the focus that's going to be on Boris Johnson this week when he gives evidence to the Commons Committee on Wednesday. And, you know, it will be decided once and for all whether he is kind of culpable for Partygate. So it's just kind of going through some of the things that that Number 10 has decided to push back off the agenda. So there's a long-awaited victims bill, for example, which is going to be it's going to be published before the 30th March, but you know, it's going to be pushed back. There's information about inflation figures which are going to be updated, and the Bank of England again deciding on interest rates, and also some report on the Metropolitan Police's conduct. So all very serious and significant issues that, you know, everybody in their daily lives is dealing with. But here we have Boris Johnson still taking up too much space in the news agenda.
OK. Charlie, Independent, the Times for you, Independent do or die report to be exposed tomorrow. Metropolitan Police faces a breakup if the toxic culture within it is not fixed.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it's a shocking story and a shocking front page, but it's not surprising. And I don't think it will be surprising to many people because of the numbers of stories that we've heard of wrongdoing within the police, particularly the Metropolitan Police, on the back of two very, very high-profile cases, such as Wayne Couzens in the Sarah Everard case, and David Carrick, who was a very senior serving Metropolitan Police officer responsible for protecting Parliament, as it happens. So these are very, very senior police officers that have fallen way below the standard of that is expected in public life, and there is institutional problems of sexism, racism and homophobia. So there are real problems for the Met Police, and so Mark Rowley...
Why would breaking up the force benefit?
So I think what the report might suggest is that in every area of the Metropolitan Police where there are problems, having smaller forces or smaller-sized groups allows there to be better scrutiny as opposed to just one police commissioner overseeing lots of different operational matters within the Met. So breaking it down, smaller groups, to enable that spotlight to be shone on where things have gone wrong, I think could be a good thing.
But given the vast number of reports, I mean, I've lost count of how many reports there have been damning of the Metropolitan Police. you know, will that definitely be the outcome of this report, that it will break up then?
Well, the Metropolitan Police and Sir Mark Rowley that's come into... You're absolutely right, because he's been out very publicly to say, look, he's sacking 2 or 3 police officers every week because of the things that he's discovering of people that should not be police officers who are in the Met and are, you know, the people that are there to protect us are not doing us the service that we should expect. So I think he will not want to see a breakup of the organisation that he's now responsible for. So I think he'll do all that he can to prevent that happening. But I think it is a very, very eye-opening report that I think will worry a lot of people.
Nikki, do you think you'd feel safer as a woman in London if the Metropolitan Police is broken up?
Yes, probably. I've not had the best dealings with them in the past for various reasons. I appreciate there are some brilliant officers that do wonderful work, but there are too many people that don't. And, you know, the problem is that our attitude and our kind of like feeling of feeling safe has gone, irrespective of whether it's true or not, actually. You know, women have lost trust after Sarah Everard. That was a watershed moment. We really needed an overhaul then. It didn't happen. Then there's been all these kind of concurrent reports of other officers behaving badly come out. I think we need a complete do-over. I think we need to abolish them and start again and build trust from scratch.
OK, Nikki. Polar plunge. Tell us about the weather situation, because the weather, and today's the first day of spring. We're going to be talking about that very, very shortly. But this is in the Daily Star, Polar Scare.
Yeah, so where is spring? I think everybody's kind of thinking the same thing at the moment. A 700-mile polar plunge is sending us back into less than 0 degrees this week, -9 degrees in many places. Snow is also forecast, so we might actually have snow at Easter. It's just, you know, not what we want, is it, really? It's time for a bit of sunshine.
Well, I saw this headline and I looked at my forecast as I was driving in the car into work, and it was all 14, 15 degrees for the next week or so. So I don't know what...
Yeah, they're saying it's heading towards us. So, I don't know, another week or so, and like they've said, predicted snow at Easter.
I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see it.
Nikki, do you ever suffer from hay fever?
Yes, I do.
Awful thing, a curse.
It is a curse, yeah. Especially if you're a broadcaster, because you kind of all bunged up.
Yeah.
And what do you do to combat it?
Nasal sprays that you can use.
Do you ever use Vaseline?
I've never used Vaseline, no.
Oh, and apparently it catches the pollen.
Oh, does it?
Do you shower in the evening, take your clothes off and wash your clothes, change your clothes at the end of the night?
I mean, I kind of do that anyway.
You have to do all that. You have to shower, get rid of your clothes that you've worn during the day. And what about you, Charlie? Are you a sufferer?
I am, actually, yes, yeah. And which I thought was quite strange, because we're talking about hay fever making a return at the same time as we're expecting this chill to descend upon the UK. So it's an odd time for anybody who wants to know what to wear outside.
We're going to find out how that all works, because we're joined now by allergist Professor Adam Fox is here to offer some top tips on the worst of the hay fever symptoms. Professor, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Morning. So, first day of spring, what's going to happen?
Well, who knows? At some point over the next week or two, we'll probably see a big increase in the amount of tree pollen around. It's been creeping up over the last few weeks, so actually the pollen season has already started for some people. It comes down to what you're allergic to and how sensitive you are. And if you're really sensitive, particularly to tree pollen, you've probably already been struggling a little.
Apparent that you can get hay fever if you move from one part of the country to another. I was speaking to somebody anecdotally who said they'd lived in Glasgow, they moved to London, and suddenly they got hay fever. I wonder if it was pollution-linked or just different sort of pollen. This is a layperson's take.
Yeah, it'll probably be different pollen. There's different amounts in different parts of the country. I think everybody thinks that it's what's at the bottom of the garden that's a problem, and it's not. It's a much more geological effect than that. So, for example, if you're allergic to birch, most of the birch that causes problems here comes over from the birch forests in Scandinavia, blown over by winds. So, yes, it'll depend where you are. But then also we're seeing a little bit of an effect of climate change now, and we're seeing a spread of different pollens. So places where previously certain pollens weren't an issue are becoming a little bit of an issue. And the pollen season seems to be becoming a little bit longer as well. So I think over time we're expecting this to get increasingly more problematic.
Can you not just be vaccinated against it?
Well, you can get what's called desensitization, which is a very effective treatment. It's not a traditional vaccine. It can be done as an injection, but more commonly, it's done as a tablet that goes under your tongue and is made out of huge doses of the pollen that you're allergic to. And you need to start well in advance of the season. So it can be very effective. NHS access isn't great. So you're going to have to fight maybe to get it, and make sure that if your hay fever is really troublesome, if you're already on antihistamines, if you're already using nasal sprays, and despite that it's interfering with your quality of life, then ask your GP for a referral to an allergy clinic.
The good news is most people that have hay fever do grow out of it, even if they are adults, but it could take over a decade for that to happen. Is that right?
Yeah, it can actually be lifelong for some people, and the earlier it starts, the more likely it is to be troublesome. Yeah, I mean, remarkably, 25% of adults in the UK suffer from hay fever, about 10 to 15% of kids. I think your panel's just nicely shown how common it is.
Finally and briefly, what are the general tips to people who do suffer from this? And it is something you can pick up at any age and any stage in life, of course, as well.
So I'd always recommend first line as a non-sleepy, long-acting antihistamine. So go to your chemist and get loratadine or cetirizine or fexofenadine. If that's not doing the job, get a nasal spray. They're really effective. The steroid ones work really, really well and they're safe. But saltwater saline nasal sprays are helpful. And as you mentioned, pollen balms, so just a bit of petroleum jelly smeared around the nostrils will also help catch pollen before it goes in.
What about local honey?
Urban myth.
Oh, really? Oh, I liked that one, that you got your honey from your local bee pollen. Shame.
Yeah.
Bee pollen, you know what I mean. Beeswax.
Yeah, nice idea, doesn't work.
Oh, well, there you go. Ruined that one. But luckily, I don't suffer from hay fever, so I don't need to worry.
Well, just stick to the KY jelly.
Oh.
That'll be... That's the main thing. Professor, thank you very much indeed. That's Professor Adam Fox there. He's an allergist, Guy's and St Thomas Hospital Foundation Trust. The time is 4 minutes to 7.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to be live in just a few moments' time from Kigali. This is as the Home Secretary signals a breakthrough on deportation flights.
But first, your forecast for the first day of spring from Greg Dewhurst.
Hello there. Welcome to your latest forecast from the Met Office. Well, the week ahead, we're going to see some outbreaks of rain, some heavy showers, and it will be windy at times too, particularly towards the middle of the week. We can see this on the pressure chart. Atlantic low pressures sweeping across the UK, bringing heavy rain, strong winds, and some heavy showers in there too. A really unsettled week to come. And it's quite wet out there first thing this morning. A lot of cloud across the UK. This band of rain stretching from Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, Northern England is slowly going to push its way northwards through the morning. Some heavy rain in places here. Another batch of wet weather also moving into central southern England and South Wales. In between, we will see some bright or sunny spells, and also ahead of the weather system for Scotland, a few sunny spells here. Overall, temperatures largely getting into double figures. If we do manage to get any brightness, say across central areas, we could see 14 or 15 degrees. Into the evening, a lot of cloud around, outbreaks of rain pushing north and eastwards. This could be heavy in places, leading to a wet rush hour, and then into the early hours, it slowly starts to push into northeastern areas. Drier conditions following on from the southwest. Some heavy showers, though. Temperatures overall staying on the mild side and starting quite high for a Tuesday morning, 12 or 13 in one or two spots. And then through the day, we'll see the rain pushing northeastwards, slowly clearing Scotland. Elsewhere, a drier interlude, but into the afternoon, we will see some heavy showers developing. And then later on, the next batch of wet and windy weather moves in from the Atlantic, affecting Northern Ireland into the afternoon and evening time. Temperatures overall very similar to Monday, perhaps 14 or 15 Celsius across some sheltered eastern spots. And then over the next few days, wet and windy weather spreading through on Wednesday, heavy showers for Thursday and for Friday. And in between, we will see some sunny spells and overall temperatures around average.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
European judges are on the brink of backing down over deportation flights as the Home Secretary claims Rwanda is ready to take thousands.
Hello there, very good morning. Good to see you. It's 7 o'clock, Monday, 20th of March. You're tuned into breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Suella Braverman has suggested she's close to a breakthrough with the European Court of Human Rights that could see deportation flights taking off for Rwanda by the summer. Our Home and Security Editor Mark White will bring us an exclusive interview with the Home Secretary.
Boris Johnson will argue today that the inquiry into whether he misled Parliament over lockdown parties is biased and unlawful. The former PM has submitted evidence in his defence ahead of a grilling by MPs on Wednesday.
UBS will take over its struggling rival Credit Suisse in a bid to avert a financial crisis. The deal was made just hours before markets opened, with the Bank of England welcoming the takeover.
Donald Trump has urged his supporters to launch mass protests as he reveals he expects to be arrested tomorrow. The former Vice President, Mike Pence, has come to his defence, claiming any arrest would be politically motivated.
And the Princess of Wales has shared a new picture of her family to mark Mother's Day. The photograph shows Catherine sitting in a tree with her three children, Louis, George and Charlotte.
Do you not think you'd have liked to have seen a picture of her with her mother?
Yeah. Her brother did that yesterday. He put out a picture bigging up Carol Middleton.
Did
so
he?
maybe that box was ticked by one of the three. But it's nice to see the royal kids, isn't it?
Yeah, because we don't see enough of them, really.
Yeah.
We don't. We never see them. Get too much of a good thing. Your views on all of this, let us know what you're talking about. You're talking about Operation Rwanda, you're talking about the emergency alert on your phones, you're talking about all of it on GB Views at gbnews.uk, or you can tweet at GB News. Well, to our top story, European judges could be on the brink of backing down on their ruling that prevented migrants being sent to Rwanda.
The Home Secretary said talks with the European Court of Human Rights were constructive, hinting that the first flights could take off before the summer.
Now, this follows Ms Braverman's trip to Rwanda's capital, where she claimed the country was ready to take thousands of migrants.
In an exclusive interview with GB News, the Home Secretary said Rwanda was a welcoming country which would offer asylum seekers a good life. Our Home and Security Editor Mark White has the story.
Critics have accused the Home Secretary of indulging in nothing more than a glorified photo op. And yes, of course, these are powerful images. But Suella Braverman's visit here is not just about the eye-catching symbolism. The UK government desperately needs the agreement with Rwanda to succeed. Without a third country willing to take relocated asylum seekers, the government's illegal migration bill is almost certain to stumble at the first hurdle. So a meeting with the Rwandan President Paul Kagame was on the agenda as the UK strengthens its partnership agreement. The Home Secretary certainly packed a lot into her two-day schedule, visiting new housing developments and other support services being geared up to accommodate thousands of asylum seekers who may end up here in the months ahead. The plans still have their critics, of course. TV presenter Gary Lineker, opposition politicians and others. But Suella Braverman told me no one should judge unless they've been here. Would you encourage them actually to come here and see for themselves what Rwanda has to offer those who would come here and settle?
Absolutely. I think there has been far too much prejudice, frankly, snobbery amongst the critics, who most of whom haven't even visited Rwanda. This is my third visit to Rwanda. This is a welcoming country. It's a dynamic economy. So to all of those critics who display a gross prejudice against Rwanda, I tell them to visit first and then judge.
An important stop-off for Suella Braverman was this huge tech hub in the capital, Kigali, home to hundreds of startups and companies from around the world. Rwanda is home to a burgeoning tech sector.
The Northern Kigali House in particular has over 200 companies, startups that are stationed out of here, also organizations that support startups, and we have more than 1,000 members. Now, 55% of these are from other African countries.
The Kepler Academy, high in the hills over Kigali, another example, says the Home Secretary, of the many education services Rwanda can provide asylum seekers. This well-established, well-respected local university has already committed to ensuring up to 25% of the students enrolled here will be refugees. But like the many housing complexes around this capital city, they have absolutely no idea just how many people they'll eventually be asked to accommodate. For in truth, the Home Secretary doesn't even know how many asylum seekers may eventually have to be sent here. It could be many thousands, but Home Office officials are quietly hoping that just like the Australian initiative against the small boats, once they finally start relocating asylum seekers, the people smugglers' business model will be broken. It's a big gamble, and this country is a vital component.
Big gamble, and the big question mark is, can she get any movement from the European Court of Human Rights? That's the big surprise to people, that they think actually there would be flexibility there.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be too optimistic, Eamonn, about there being any real meaningful progress with the ECHR. I've seen it so many times before, either with the European Court or courts, of course, in the UK, where effectively the government is very optimistic that they can push through something and they get knocked back. Now, what they are trying to do effectively with the European Court of Human Rights is this controversial Rule 39. It's very complex, but effectively it's allowing them, to the European Court that is, to issue an injunction on behalf of individuals who are appealing that a certain move infringes on their human rights. Now, what the government want the ECHR to do is to try to raise the threshold for when that Rule 39 might be implemented. They're also urging the European Court of Human Rights to take into consideration the fact that the High Court in the UK ruled that the Rwanda policy was lawful, and that within the next month or two the Court of Appeal here in the UK, in the latest stage of the UK end of the appeals, might well also decide that the deal is lawful. So they're asking them to consider that, Eamonn, and they're also asking the European Court of Human Rights to give the UK government the option of being able to be represented before any Rule 39 decision is made and that injunction passed. As I say, it's all very complex, and that's why it's a multi-pronged approach, really, to try to solve the small boat crisis. And one key element to it is the operation here in Rwanda that they want to get off the ground, that they want these asylum seekers to be flown here. And of course, as we heard there from Suella Braverman, she is convinced that actually those coming here will be able to enjoy a good quality of life.
But Mark, what are we dealing with? I mean, you're there. I've never been. I have to say I've no desire to go to Rwanda because it's tarnished by that whole genocide programme. What's it like?
Well, actually, I would encourage you to come to Rwanda. It's my first time here as well. I have been very pleasantly surprised by just the progress that this country has made. Remember, you pointed to the fact that they have had to cope with the aftermath of the genocide. So effectively, in less than 30 years, they've had to rebuild this country. And yes, they have effectively a strong man in Paul Kagame, the president of this country. They have issues of stability with their neighbours in the DRC. But here in the capital, it is a vibrant capital city. Everywhere you look, there is development underway. They have a huge conference centre. We're talking to you from this conference centre at the moment. That's another aspect that to the world. They're encouraging big organisations and institutions to come here for the conference. They've just had the FIFA conference that's taking place here. They had the Commonwealth Heads of Government conference that took place here recently as well. So perhaps you might be surprised, Eamonn, by actually what this city has to offer. It's very clean, it's very safe in the city.
OK, Mark White, thank you. And just a reminder, if you want to see the full exclusive interview with the Home Secretary, you can see that at 9:30 here on GB News.
Boris Johnson set to face a grilling this week over comments he made to Parliament about lockdown parties. The former Prime Minister has submitted evidence in his defence, which will be published today, and claims the inquiry is unlawful and biased.
While speaking on the Camilla Tominey show on GB News, the former Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, seemed open to Boris' return.
I think, he's been written off so many times. The last 25 years, the number of articles I've read saying he's finished, he's done, it's over.
What, do you think he'll one day lead the party again?
I think anything can happen. I think he could do. I think, he's someone who I would never rule out or count out.
Well, joining us for more on this is the Deputy Political Editor of HuffPost, Sophia Slay. Is that the endorsement Boris Johnson necessarily wants from Kwasi Kwarteng?
Actually, I think Kwasi Kwarteng might have a point, One of my favourite quotes about Boris Johnson actually came from his predecessor, David Cameron. He described him as a greased piglet. And I think, I think that is a very good description, because he does have an ability to sort of slither away from trouble. And I wouldn't be surprised if he can. He's often described as Teflon. It's a bit of a cliche, but, he does have an ability to sort of wheedle his way out of trouble.
Well, just explain how he could wriggle out of this, because at the moment the Privileges Committee have found 4 occasions when they believe that he misled Parliament. This will be his chance to submit, first of all, a dossier today, and then he will give oral evidence on Wednesday. How's he going to wriggle out of this?
Well, so we're all sort of chomping at the bit, us journalists, to get hold of this defence dossier that his team are going to release today. I think we'll get hold of it this afternoon, and I think it'll be, a long dossier of his defence. And I think he's going to sort of, it sounds like there's going to be lots of WhatsApp messages in there from officials and advisors around the time that he was giving statements in Parliament. I mean, this whole row centres on whether or not he lied to or misled Parliament over parties in Downing Street. And I think it sounds like they're going to be releasing statements from his Director of Communications, who was a political appointment at the time, sort of advising him, you know, Prime Minister, this is the line you should take on this massive scandal that's in the press at the moment. And I think his argument, his team's argument, will be, well, he was, you know, acting in good faith on the advice that his advisors were giving him. And I think that's, you know, one might argue that maybe he's going to pass the buck on to advisors. But, you know...
So does this all come down to the knowingly misled? So, you know, he might have misled Parliament, but not, you know, in good faith.
Yeah, I think knowingly is the kind of... I mean, that's the key for his team, is they're going to be saying, well, you know, he didn't knowingly do it, he was acting on advice. But I think the committee of MPs who are going to be scrutinising him for quite a few hours on Wednesday will sort of say, well, no, hold on, you know, I think they'll sort of say, this was your backyard, this was where you lived, this was where you worked, you set the rules, the guidance, you were telling us how we should live our life. How did you not know that this was going on under your nose the whole time? So I think they will be throwing that in his face in response to sort of, you know, I was just acting on what I've been told.
So he's either a genius, he's confident in everything that he does, or he's a complete buffoon who doesn't take briefings or know what goes on around him. Who is the real Boris Johnson?
Well, I think very few people know who the real Boris Johnson is. I think he's a very interesting character. I mean, the people that know him best and have known him for the longest aren't always the most complimentary of our former Prime Minister. But I think we've certainly seen he has an ability to really get himself out of a sticky situation. And also, what I will say, he's had a long time to prepare for this, right? I haven't got the sense that there is a smoking gun from the committee yet. I mean, we might be having a different conversation on Wednesday, but I do think they do need a smoking gun. You know, they need an acknowledgement, maybe in writing, an email trail or something from the former Prime Minister saying, you know, how am I going to get myself out of this one? What can I say? And an acknowledgement that, yes, a party or rule breaking went on, but how can I sort of, you know, cover it up, I suppose.
Well, look, you say Boris has been preparing for this and he's got a top KC on the case. His whole political future hangs on this because ultimately he could lose his seat if the worst happens. So talk us through the outcomes, possibly, of this week.
Yeah, I mean, so this week is a huge week, actually, for Boris Johnson. It does have the potential to end his political life, or at least start the beginning of the end of his political career. I personally think that might be a bit of a tall order, but basically this committee, the Privileges Committee, they will make a decision, they'll come to a conclusion on whether or not they believe he misled and lied to Parliament. They will then make a recommendation of sort of perhaps he should be suspended for X amount of days, and that will go to MPs. MPs will then vote on whether to sort of accept or reject that advice. Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, has told his Tory MPs that they can have a free vote. They can vote with their conscience how they want to, which I think is probably a smart move on his part. And then, depending on what the MPs decide, if it's over sort of a long suspension over 10 days, there is an ability to it's called the Recall of MPs Act. So basically, if I think it's 10% of his constituents, if they signed to call for a by-election, lend their signatures, then there will be a by-election triggered in Uxbridge and South Ruislip.
It's a marginal seat as well, isn't it? Which is not guaranteed he would win a by-election if or he would have to stand down, would he? What would be the situation if it was a by-election? Would he re-stand there, or...?
Well,
that's a whole other can of worms.
I mean, he's just been reselected for that seat.
Okay.
So I mean, there were rumours quite recently about how he might do a chicken run to a safer seat because it is, you know, it does look a little, it could be wobbly. But I mean, the fact that he has already been reselected, sort of, he strikes me as a man that will want to run again. But you know, we might be having another conversation after Wednesday.
So is he the chicken run or the greased piglet? We'll find out. Lovely talking to you, Sophia. Thank you very much indeed. Sophia Slay is from the Huffington Post. The time, 17 minutes past 7.
Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. The Home Secretary has said she's prepared to change the law to expel rogue officers in the Metropolitan Police. Suella Braverman acknowledged it's very difficult for chief constables to get rid of officers who she says are falling short.
UBS will take over its rival Credit Suisse in a bid to avert a financial crisis. The deal's worth £2.5 billion and it's been welcomed by the Bank of England. The Swiss banks employ more than 11,000 in the City of London. Heavy job losses are expected there as a result of this merger.
The interim chief executive of the SNP said there's a tremendous mess in the party amid staff resignations and a row over membership numbers. Mike Russell, who stepped in to replace outgoing President Peter Murrell, said voting for the next party leader must go ahead regardless to rebuild the trust of Scotland.
A new so-called immediate justice strategy proposed by the government will force those who engage in antisocial behaviour such as graffiti or fly tipping to clean up their mess within 48 hours of carrying out the offence.
Observers have likened the strategy to the approach taken by New Labour. Well, we can speak to a former advisor now to Tony Blair, John McTernan. Good to see you, John. Is this the reincarnation of the ASBO then?
Yes, it is, and it's an irony, isn't it, that the Tory government abolished the ASBO. And they finally come round to agreeing that Tony Blair was right. Antisocial behaviour is the beginning of crime and disorder in communities. It disproportionately hits impacts on working class communities, on council estates, and something has to be done. And, you know, this is yet again, like the childcare announcement last week, this is the Tories trying to take a Labour policy because Labour's Sarah Jones, the crime spokesperson, the antisocial behaviour spokesperson, announced something like this in February. So, you know, imitation is the best form of flattery, isn't it?
But you also believe in it, you know, totally get your point about stealing the policies and whatever, John. But this was what they're calling immediate justice. Why do you think immediate justice works? First of all, it's something people want to see, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, look, I think, the devil in these policies is the detail. There's not enough police on the streets. You know, we used to have police and community support officers across London. We don't have very many of them anymore. Who's actually going to spot people? Who's going to catch people? How are they going to enforce this? How is the justice being done? We don't have a magistrates court system working. We don't have a court system that's working. It's very unclear how this is being done, except, you know, if you're caught vandalizing something, you're going to be forced to do something in 48 hours. It's very unclear because remember, I mean, Tony's policy was very successful and very popular, but the idea of marching young thugs to the cash point to pay for an immediate fine, that kind of disappeared, didn't it, into the ether. I suspect this idea of 48 hours being forced to do something by the police aren't the courts. So how's that going to operate? Well, we'll wait for the details, don't we?
You talk about how the Tories derided the ASBO, and I suppose lots of people would say it turned generations against the young, and there were lots of social problems that caused antisocial behaviour which weren't necessarily understood. How is that different then from this incarnation?
Well, if you think about what Tony Blair was famous for saying, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. When I was working for Tony on community policy, we had ASBOs on the one hand and the Respect agenda. We are also spending £100 billion investing in making the worst communities better off, improving their housing, improving access to jobs, improving the local environment. And so it's the rundown of the public sphere as well as the rundown of public services which make this very different. There are no youth clubs. Where are the youth clubs for people to be diverted to? Where are the activities for young people who just want to spend time with each other? This is the problem. You can't do the tough stuff without the soft stuff. They have to work together, and there's no intention I can see of doing anything for youth services, which is everybody knows that's the best intervention to divert people from vandalism.
But John, that vandalism thing, correct me if I'm wrong, did you guys not base your policy there under the Blair government from what was going on, or what had been going on in New York, the whole idea of zero tolerance towards graffiti, for instance?
Yeah, no, we did. It was the broken windows theory, which is that if a window is broken on a council estate and people don't fix it in a week or 2 weeks, then everybody thinks, well, nobody cares. That definitely was part of it, and part of the investment that we had was actually and people in communities who reported and got abandoned cars cleaned up. So the sort of things that happen in middle class communities naturally, we managed to get happening in working class communities. The problem of the rundown of the public sphere at the moment is a lot of people think, in any community in the UK, you think, who's in charge, who's doing anything, why are there so many potholes, Again, we saw the government responding to that the other week in the budget. But it's the total rundown. And America was always different because Giuliani, when he was a good mayor of New York, had fines for people jumping the turnstiles on the New York subway. The thing is, 1 in 10 people was a bail escapee, a kind of bail absconder, or was carrying a concealed weapon of the people who were on the New York subway. That's very different. So it's a kind of different context. But yeah, paying attention to the local environment is really important for people's sense of community solidarity.
I love that. I love that idea, and I think it's absolutely true. John, we could do a whole programme on this. Maybe you should come back sometime and we'll spread it out and talk more. John McTiernan there, thank you very much indeed. The thing is, I've spent a lot of time, for instance, on motorways, driving up and down motorways the past few months, and the amount of litter on motorways that nobody does anything about it. Slip roads going off. It seems to be you go off a slip road on a motorway and you just throw well, I don't. No. But somebody's throwing stuff out the window. Yeah. Fast food, coffee cups, goodness knows what. But you just look on the verges of motorways and it's a danger if nothing else. And the Highways Agency obviously don't seem to be doing much. I can't keep up with what's going on there. March them out, make them pick it up.
Oh,
okay.
Absolutely.
24 minutes past 7 o'clock.
Stay with us. We'll have all the latest on the NHS in Scotland as a new leader is to be elected in a week's time. Stay with us.
I don't think...
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Monday, March the 20th, and today is International Happiness Day. So the question is, what makes you or me happy?
Well, I just had a really lovely Mother's Day. So family. I had a really nice, I was spoilt rotten and...
Russian?
Rotten. I was spoilt rotten.
Was it like a white Russian?
No. No, although Russian. I did have a few alcoholic drinks on Mother's Day,
Did that
which was
help?
lovely. It was
Did
lovely.
that make you
Yes,
happy?
I went to a kids' party where they served Bloody Marys.
To the children?
No, although my kids wanted to drink it because it looked like tomato juice, so that was quite complicated.
Sure they did.
What makes you happy?
My dog makes
Oh,
me happy.
Maggie.
Cars make me happy. Car showrooms make me happy. Cinema makes me happy.
Football? Was it a good night for you?
No, football itself, Ireland winning the Grand Slam on Saturday was magnificent.
Yeah.
And England put up a really tremendous fight, a man down. And, Manchester United winning yesterday was phenomenal. And those 3 red cards to Fulham, 3 of the happiest red cards I've ever seen.
That's what makes them happy.
But generally, see, football, a match can go one way or the other. But the actual thing about being with your football family, people who support a certain team or visiting the Theatre of Dreams and being there. I mean, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
Whether you win, lose or draw makes me happy.
Yeah.
But until the match happens, But tell us what makes you happy on this International Day of Happiness.
We need more of these.
Or as Ken Dodd used to say, what did he used to say?
I have no idea. Go on, hit me.
Happiness, happiness, the greatest gift that I possess. I thank the Lord. I had to forget the words now.
There you go.
7:50. We'll tell you why Harrogate has been named the happiest place to live now. Isn't that fantastic, to live somewhere that has been crowned the happiest place in the UK?
Well, it's because they've got that fantastic bun shop, isn't it? It's famous for, I can't remember what it's called, but...
Yes, Mary Smith's.
Mary Smith. I wanted to say Sally Lund's buns, but that's Bath. Anyway, someone in Harrogate will email us and tell us the famous
They do, and
they
have fish and chip shops, and they have got the tea rooms. The tea rooms you're talking about.
Yes, and the special cakes. Anyway.
I've only ever been to Harrogate once, so I thought it was lovely. I thought it was really beautiful. But
wonderful people. My sister-in-law's from there.
Is she? Do we not fancy a trip up the motorway?
Yes, let's go to Harrogate.
To Harrogate
Fabulous.
for the day.
Go to Spa and
Can we do Harrogate and back in a day? It'd be a bit long, wouldn't it?
It'll be a long day, yeah.
Okay.
8:20. We're going to be talking about how best to deal with a bully. This is after a football mum sparked a debate by praising her daughter for punching the bully in the face. We'll debate if it is better to turn the other cheek or if violence is the answer.
Now, look, just ahead of that, because that's an hour away now, I have to say that I have learned through experience from school and growing up in a very tough Belfast, it's better to punch.
I thought you were going to say that.
Get the punch in front.
I thought you were going to surprise me and say no, but actually deep down I know the answer.
And particularly if schools don't... You're doing your child no favour at all by saying turn the other cheek or just give in or whatever, because the bullying does not go away. Because I will say this to anyone, it's there in the workplace. It's there in the workplace as well all the time.
Yeah.
And if someone knows you're not going to stand for it, you're less likely to get it.
But I think there's a difference. If say, your kid's being punched, I'd say punch back. Stand up for yourself. Stand your ground. But I wouldn't say if there is a situation where they've been bullying you and then you just go up to them and lamp them in the face, I wouldn't agree with that, because that could get your child expelled and that would have consequences for your outcomes in life. So as usual, it's a bit nuanced for me.
But remember, if you're going to hit someone...
Do it properly.
Yeah. GB Views at gbnews.uk or tweet at GB News. to Scotland. Scotland makes me happy. I love Scotland.
I love Scotland as well.
I watched a documentary on the Loch Ness Monster last night, even though, I mean, I have to admit, the Loch Ness Monster's not there. It's not there.
Good.
There's a big catfish or something there.
Yeah.
That may be there. But anyway, I want to believe in the Loch Ness Monster. I love Scotland. Look, do you know, why is the water of Loch Ness, and I've been there, and you've probably
brown.
been there. No, it's black.
Oh, clear. Oh, right.
It's black.
Is it because of the depth? Depth of the
peat,
the
as
loch?
you say,
Yeah, maybe
whatever's
peat,
there.
yeah.
But anyway, in Scotland, it's been a turbulent few days for the SNP.
Yeah, and today Nicola Sturgeon will take part in her last official visit in office, opening an NHS treatment centre.
Well, I hear she's owned loose women, but, and believe me, I have it on very good authority. And with the health service in Scotland in critical condition, whoever takes over a week from now will face a major challenge to protect it.
Our Scotland reporter Tony Maguire has more.
We're just days away from finding out who will serve as Scotland's next First Minister, and alongside them, a new Health Secretary will face the monumental task of repairing a National Health Service that's stretched to breaking point. NHS Scotland continues to buckle under the post-pandemic backlog, and weary healthcare professionals are rapidly losing faith in their ability to sufficiently treat the population. 65% of A&E patients waiting beyond the 4-hour target, more than 6,000 unfilled posts across Scotland, dentists reducing NHS treatment or walking away altogether. Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar believes that the very survival of the NHS is at risk in Scotland.
We have a National Health Service that was challenged pre the pandemic. Of course, the pandemic has exacerbated a problem, but we shouldn't pretend it created the problem. On every single measure, our NHS is weaker now than it was even a year ago, never mind 3 years ago. Now 770,000 people on an NHS waiting list. Our CAM stats, the worst that they have ever been. Our A&E stats, the worst they've ever been. Our cancer waiting times, the worst they have ever been. And right now we've got a government that wants to put its head in the sand rather than confront that big crisis facing our NHS.
That crisis is forcing NHS dentistry to the brink of collapse. More than half of Scottish dentists have already reduced their NHS treatment, with 83% planning further service reductions over the coming year. Chairman of the Scottish Dental Practice Owner Group, Dr Ataf Bashir, says it's time for the Scottish Government to do more than just pay lip service to their concerns.
The first thing that needs to happen is we need to go from a disease-centred model to a preventative-centred model. So that's the first thing. They need to start to listen to the profession and then take action based upon what the feedback is. But certainly what the feedback is unanimously is that this current system needs to change because it's not fit for the Scottish people.
Let's be clear, the NHS is not beyond repair. In fact, the last few years there's been many a story which paints the service in a good light. We saw the Scottish Government oversee the fastest COVID vaccine rollout in the UK, and they acted quickly to resolve a pay dispute with doctors and nurses to avoid any industrial action. It's just that right now, poor performance outweighs those achievements, and there's a growing sentiment that both patients and staff deserve better. So whoever emerges as First Minister, the pressure will be on from day one to drastically improve the way healthcare is managed here in Scotland.
We've got so much to talk about in the papers today. A glorious law. Ruthie Henschel's mum died, and she wants to stop care home residents ever dying alone again. That was during the pandemic. Antisocial behaviour, we're going to be talking about that as well, and discussing the ongoing financial deal between UBS and Credit Suisse, OK? Our newspaper review, Charlie Rowley and Nikki Hodgson next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
28 is the time. Front pages look like this.
The Sun front page says European judges are caving in on migrants as the Home Secretary reaches a deal on the Rwanda flights.
The Mail also focuses on hopes of an agreement with European judges. The photograph there is the Princess of Wales with her 3 children released for Mother's Day.
The Telegraph says city jobs are under threat as cut-price Credit Suisse sale staves off a financial meltdown.
The Times says the toxic Metropolitan Police Force faces being broken up as the service is giving an ultimatum to fix widespread failings.
Well, joining us to go through some of the headlines in more detail is the former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, and the author Nikki Hudson. Welcome back to both of you. Thanks.
It's a very sad story, front page of the Mail, with the actress Ruthie Henschel. And her mum died alone during COVID lockdown, and she wants to make sure that this could never happen again, that residents could never die alone.
Yeah, so Ruthie Henschel, who's obviously the West End theatre star, is joining together with some families who are campaigning for something called Gloria's Law, which is named after Ruthie's mum. And it's basically to ensure that if anything ever happens that was, that's similar to COVID, or we ever have a situation where people have to be protected, they're allowed someone called a care supporter to go in, which can be a family member, to be with them at the end of their lives. There's some really, really poignant details in this report, basically saying that, Gloria died when she was 88 in 2021. She spent a year alone in a room with no stimulation, and it was only the last 5 weeks of her life that Ruthie was allowed to go see her and spend time with her. And, she's basically saying it's barbaric, we should never have treated people like this, and let's make sure it never happens again.
I mean, I think pretty much everyone would have to agree with that, Charlie. A lot of lessons to be learnt from that.
I think so. I think that's absolutely right. And I think after the year that we've had, and particularly during COVID, and particularly when care homes were such a front and centre of supporting, obviously, the most vulnerable people, and it was the Department of Health that said that they were going to throw a protective ring around care homes. And obviously, I think they were some of the most moving stories that people couldn't see, as I say, families and loved ones who are the most vulnerable in society, and haven't been able to say goodbye to them. So I think what we're doing is brilliant.
Awful. Daily Mail, front page. Tough new measures being drawn up by ministers. We were talking about them just 5 minutes ago to deal with antisocial behaviour, Charlie.
Exactly so, and I think this is one of the things that the public really care about. It's about making sure that if anybody commits an act of antisocial behaviour, so graffiti on local walls or architecture, making sure that those that cause the damage clear it up. And I think this is part of a drive to make sure that the government feels as though it's on the side of hard-working people that work hard, play by the rules, do the right thing, and people want to see local justice served.
Charlie, you'll have seen, we had a former advisor to Tony Blair on, and he was saying this is just a land grab from the Tories. This was a Labour policy. I mean, that's just politics aside, really. But the criticism at the time was that it demonised young people who often had lots of problems in their lives. Is that still applicable to this, do you think?
Well, I'm a huge fan of John McTurner, who you had on earlier on. But I think it's always a balance between, and particularly back in 1997, it's always a question of do you have more police on the streets, so police that have the full powers versus the police and community support officers, which Labour brought in. There's still a debate about that. The government have committed to bring in, recruit 20,000 more police officers to make sure that there's that presence that's missing that John rightly articulated. But I think it's all about making sure that communities feel as though that they are protected, that they're served by the police, but also where you have
all this
that go
business of, not demonising people. We've got to demonise someone. It's good to demonise someone, have some sort of hate figure.
Well, but, young people, why are they disaffected that they feel that they want to graffiti? You've got to ask that question. People shouldn't feel that they want to go and deface buildings. They should feel that they've got ownership over the place that they live in, and that's the issue.
You look at some of the crimes. I was looking at something last week about a mobile library burnt down, the van burnt down. Why? Why do you want
there's no need.
Who do you hate doing that? But I think that by and large, getting people to take responsibility for what they have done is no bad thing, whether they repair it properly or not. The idea that they go in, they clean out fire-damaged books and clean down a van or whatever it is, just to be shown that this is not acceptable behaviour.
Yeah, sometimes it's too easy, isn't it, to be... Some of the penalties are just not...
Sure, but we have to understand why they do it in the first place. Why do they feel so,
Because
disattached?
they get away with it.
I don't think it's just that, though. I mean, I think it's feeling of not feeling connected to the environment that they live in and to the services that are there for them.
Yeah, OK. We go, Nikki, to The Guardian, front page of The Guardian, and health union members organising to reject pay agreement, NHS pay deal.
Yeah, this is quite interesting. Only The Guardian have run this as a front page. It's not a big story in any of the other papers, but it's basically about the fact that Britain's biggest health union is saying that the 5% pay increase, which has been negotiated with the government, isn't good enough. They were originally asking for 19%, and they're saying that they are going to keep pushing for more money. Obviously, these negotiations have been going on a long time. We really need to get them resolved because we need health workers at work and we need this kind of settled. But, yeah, it's the idea that they're going to push back on it. So
it's interesting when the unions, sort of negotiators and leaders have actually struck a deal and then the members aren't happy with it, and you think, well, maybe the leaders and the union members realise that you might not agree with the government position, but that position is fixed and they've actually given quite a lot based on that position.
Well, that's the point of negotiation. You don't necessarily get what you want. That's kind of the first rule of it, isn't it?
I guess with everything that was announced last week with the OBR report and where inflation is expected to be at the end of the year, it kind of adds weight to the government's argument.
Some people would say you've got to be realistic about what you can get as a result of that negotiation, and it's two-way. Other people will say, well, good for them standing up for the workers. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that unfolds in the next few weeks.
Bit of a knife edge there. Charlie, this story in the Telegraph, page 2, the long, controversial issue of conversion therapy and whether or not it should be made illegal, and this comparison being made to female genital mutilation.
No, that's absolutely right, and it's a Conservative MP, Peter Gibson for Darlington, who gave an interview to this very channel yesterday to make it absolutely the case that he believes that gay conversion therapy should be banned in statute, and I think that's something that we were just talking about sort of community justice when it comes to antisocial behaviour. This is about social justice for many people across the country who are gay, who feel as though actually the practice of conversion therapy that still exists needs to be outlawed.
Tell us about conversion therapy. Is it voluntary or is it compulsory in some places? What does it involve?
Well, there's a huge range. I mean, you hear a lot of stories, particularly in the United States, where there are institutions and individuals that you could seek out somebody to undergo treatment, in inverted commas, if you want to
introduce it in Northern Ireland. The Democratic Unionist Party wanted to introduce it in Northern Ireland.
Well, I think I didn't know that. But in terms of banning and in terms of the practice, I think many people would, the majority of people would say that it's something that in 2023 is not something that should be taking place, whether it's shielded by a church, shielded by an institution, shielded by any other organisation.
Because the thing is, the belief is almost it's like it's a sickness or a possession. It's like getting an exorcist to drive the gayness out, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, that's basically what you're talking about here.
Exactly so. And there'll be people who feel as though if they're not comfortable who they are, if they don't feel as though they're able to live their lives openly, wholly and fully as they will seek out these practices.
What is the reason for not changing the law? Why has it not been made illegal so far?
Well, I think because of the grey areas surrounding, how would you define it? Because obviously, there is a fine line actually between saying I'm uncomfortable being myself, and you want to seek advice, and somebody, potentially saying to someone that might be a younger person, for example, to say, well, be yourself, but also trying to protect an individual. There's a difference between protecting somebody from other things and rather than encouraging. So there's a difference between how you would handle a particularly young person who might be...
Well, Peter Gibson spells it out there. Comparable to FGM and domestic violence, he says. That's conversion therapy. Let's finish talking about something really nice. This is from the Daily Mail, page 11, Nikki.
Yes.
Romantic nostalgia.
So a bit of advice for you for your relationship this week. Always good to start with that on a Monday morning, I find. It's basically saying that it's a report done in the journal Current Opinion in Psychology, and it said that having nostalgic memories about your relationship is the key to long-term marital bliss. So you should remember about your wedding day and the first kiss you ever had, and you'll feel happier about your partner as a result.
I reckon that's true.
I think it's definitely true. Apparently it says that's the key to happy...
It's only true if you had a nice wedding day.
Or a nice first kiss. Presumably you have a good first kiss if you've ended up marrying them.
Yes, that's true. And it's much better than thinking about all the times they haven't loaded the dishwasher properly.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a magnet on my kitchen fridge which has my husband in a log flume with the two children, my husband with the two children, and
like
he just...
Princess Diana.
Yes, it's a bit like that, and he looks like such a lovely dad, and the kids look so happy. Whenever I'm fuming with him about the dishwasher or whatever, that does genuinely stop me from losing my mind.
It's what you have to do. Nostalgia, where we slightly maybe change the kind of memories or overemphasise them, is good for all of us, so there you go.
You a nostalgic person, Charlie?
I can be at times, depending on the topic.
But you can see that change in your mood if you thought of nice things, nice time, nice period.
It's usually about sunsets or holidays rather than individuals.
But apparently it's easier for any of us to think of something bad in our life than it is to think of something easy.
And that's a strange thing, but you're absolutely right. We tend to hold on to the negatives in our lives rather than focus on the positive.
It's easy to smash things down rather than to build them. Do you remember your first kiss with Ruthie?
Oh, with her? Right. I do, yes, yes.
And are you feeling that rush of endorphins and love?
There was too many tongues involved.
Oh, God.
And not from me.
My God.
Anyway, guys, thank you very much. The guys are going to be back in 40 minutes' time. Today is International Day of Happiness, and according to a survey by Rightmove, the Yorkshire town of Harrogate is one of the happiest places to live in the whole country.
Well, our reporter Anna Riley went to find out why.
On the International Day of Happiness, where better to visit than the Victorian spa town of Harrogate. It's been voted the happiest area to live in Yorkshire due to its green spaces, stunning architecture and the friendly folk that make the place. And the town also puts a smile on the face of its many visitors.
Since 1571, people have been flocking here from far and wide once the spa waters were discovered to really feel those health benefits of the spa waters. They came here to do that and to take the waters. That's where it all started really, and it's only sort of increased since then. People still coming for those health benefits to make themselves feel good in the Harrogate district.
And feel happy.
And feel happy, definitely.
Just down the road is the Fat Badger pub, and staff here say it's the happiest alehouse in town.
It's got its own little feel as Harrogate. It's different than a lot of places. I can't put my finger on the happiness, but I think most of it stems down to the Fat Badger. Sometimes wake up and think, do you know, I look after pretty much what we think's the best pub in Harrogate, and Harrogate's regularly voted the happiest place to live in the UK, and the UK is a lovely place to live. It's like, got a pretty good job really, haven't I, when you put it that way?
With plenty of places to eat and drink, Harrogate also makes for delightful dining.
I moved here 25 years ago. When you come to Harrogate, you just don't ever want to go away. It's great for food and drink around here. You know, the local produce that we have, the growers, the farmers. North Yorkshire is known for having some fantastic agriculture, and it means that we can buy and deliver fantastic produce. Great beers. We've got a load of great breweries around here, like Black Sheep and the likes, on our doorstep. So, again, what's not to love?
And the people here are certainly pleased with the town they call home.
Everyone's very friendly, and you get a good mix of tourists and locals here as well. It's just got everything going for it.
I've got 4 dogs, and I live just at the top of the Stray. I can just step out my doorstep and walk for hours in beautiful scenery.
So it's got that perfect mix of town and country, and why wouldn't you want to live here? It's amazing.
I think what's really nice is the big green open spaces as well, and a sense of identity.
So it seems happiness can certainly be found in Harrogate. Anna Riley, GB News.
And if you're thinking of moving there, 400k average price of a house in Harrogate.
Yeah, and guess the name of the tea shop? Betty's.
Betty's.
Yeah, people, you can't book it. You can't get a spot for afternoon tea there. You have to queue around the block, and people do every day.
Do they?
For their delicacies. So I think we should go on a date to Betty's.
No, you see, that's an interesting thing. I'm sure, Betty, your delicacies are wonderful, but I wouldn't queue for anybody.
Oh.
See, people say they queue
Well, they'll
for...
probably sort you out, to be fair. They'll just usher you in, like they do everywhere we go.
That's why you stick to me. That's why you stick to me like a little bit.
The other day we were going in somewhere and he said, don't you go first. They won't let us in. And you were absolutely right. I was like, yeah, go on then, fair point. Sort us our table. So I haven't booked.
You need to dress better and look a bit more affluent. That's the thing. 6 minutes now before 8 o'clock coming up.
Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, will be joining us live from Kigali this morning. Suella Braverman, of course, been in Rwanda over the weekend, and she's been hailing constructive talks with the European Court of Human Rights. We'll have all the details.
But first, your forecast for this first day of spring. Greg Dewhurst.
Hello there. Welcome to your latest forecast from the Met Office. Well, the week ahead, we're going to see some outbreaks of rain, some heavy showers, and it will be windy at times too, particularly towards the middle of the week. We can see this on the pressure chart. Atlantic low pressures sweeping across the UK, bringing heavy rain, strong winds, and some heavy showers in there too. A really unsettled week to come. And it's quite wet out there first thing this morning. A lot of cloud across the UK. This band of rain stretching from Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, Northern England is slowly going to push its way northwards through the morning. Some heavy rain in places here. Another batch of wet weather also moving into central southern England and South Wales. In between, we will see some bright or sunny spells, and also ahead of the weather system for Scotland, a few sunny spells here. Overall, temperatures largely getting into double figures. If we do manage to get any brightness, say across central areas, we could see 14 or 15 degrees. Into the evening, a lot of cloud around, outbreaks of rain pushing north and eastwards. This could be heavy in places, leading to a wet rush hour, and then into the early hours, it slowly starts to push into northeastern areas. Drier conditions following on from the southwest. Some heavy showers, though. Temperatures overall staying on the mild side and starting quite high for a Tuesday morning, 12 or 13 in one or two spots. And then through the day, we'll see the rain pushing northeastwards, slowly clearing Scotland. Elsewhere, a drier interlude, but into the afternoon, we will see some heavy showers developing. And then later on, the next batch of wet and windy weather moves in from the Atlantic, affecting Northern Ireland into the afternoon and evening time. Temperatures overall very similar to Monday, perhaps 14 or 15 Celsius across some sheltered eastern spots. And then over the next few days, wet and windy weather spreading through on Wednesday, heavy showers for Thursday and for Friday. And in between, we will see some sunny spells and overall temperatures around average.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, I'm Michael Portillo. You can join me every Sunday on GB News. Remember to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel and to download the GB News app to stay up to date with the latest GB News content. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
European judges are on the brink of backing down over deportation flights as the Home Secretary claims Rwanda is already to take thousands.
Good morning, it's 8:01, it's Monday the 20th of March. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Leading the news this morning, Suella Braverman has suggested she's close to a breakthrough with the European Court of Human Rights that could see deportation flights taking off for Rwanda by the summer.
And I'm here in the Rwandan capital, Kigali, where they're gearing up to take the first of those asylum flights. Many thousands of people could arrive here in the coming months. I've been speaking exclusively to the Home Secretary.
Boris Johnson will argue today that the inquiry into whether he misled Parliament over lockdown parties is biased and unlawful. The former PM has submitted evidence in his defence ahead of a grilling by MPs on Wednesday.
The bank UBS will take over its struggling rival Credit Suisse in a bid to avert a financial crisis. The deal was made just hours before markets opened, with the Bank of England welcoming the takeover.
Donald Trump has urged his supporters to launch mass protests as he reveals he expects to be arrested tomorrow. His former Vice President Mike Pence has come to his defence, claiming any arrest would be politically motivated.
And the Princess of Wales has shared a new picture of her family to mark Mother's Day. The photograph shows Catherine sitting in a tree with her children Louis, George and Charlotte.
And lots of you have been getting in touch this morning. Thanks for your emails. Thank you for your tweets. Keep them coming. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And don't forget, let us know where you're watching or listening from.
So here's our top story this morning. European judges could be on the brink of backing down on their ruling that prevented migrants being sent to Rwanda.
The Home Secretary said talks with the European Court of Human Rights were constructive, hinting that the first flights could take off before the summer.
Now, this follows Ms Braverman's trip to Rwanda's capital, Kigali, where she claimed the country was ready to take thousands of migrants.
In an exclusive interview with GB News, the Home Secretary said Rwanda was a dynamic and welcoming country which would offer asylum seekers a good life. Our Home and Security Editor Mark White reports.
Critics have accused the Home Secretary of indulging in nothing more than a glorified photo op. And yes, of course, these are powerful images. But Suella Braverman's visit here is not just about the eye-catching symbolism. The UK government desperately needs the agreement with Rwanda to succeed. Without a third country willing to take relocated asylum seekers, the government's illegal migration bill is almost certain to stumble at the first hurdle. So a meeting with the Rwandan President Paul Kagame was on the agenda as the UK strengthens its partnership agreement. The Home Secretary certainly packed a lot into her two-day schedule, visiting new housing developments and other support services being geared up to accommodate thousands of asylum seekers who may end up here in the months ahead. The plans still have their critics, of course. TV presenter Gary Lineker, opposition politicians and others. But Suella Braverman told me no one should judge unless they've been here. Would you encourage them actually to come here and see for themselves what Rwanda has to offer those who would come here and settle?
Absolutely. I think there has been far too much prejudice, frankly, snobbery amongst the critics, who most of whom haven't even visited Rwanda. This is my third visit to Rwanda. This is a welcoming country. It's a dynamic economy. So to all of those critics who display a gross prejudice against Rwanda, I tell them to visit first and then judge.
An important stop-off for Suella Braverman was this huge tech hub in the capital, Kigali, home to hundreds of startups and companies from around the world. Rwanda is home to a burgeoning tech sector.
The Noskin Kigali House in particular has over 200 companies, startups that are stationed out of here, also organizations that support startups, and we have more than 1,000 members. Now, 55% of these are from other African countries.
The Kepler Academy, high in the hills over Kigali, another example, says the Home Secretary, of the many education services Rwanda can provide asylum seekers. This well-established, well-respected local university has already committed to ensuring up to 25% of the students enrolled here will be refugees. But like the many housing complexes around this capital city, they have absolutely no idea just how many people they'll eventually be asked to accommodate. For in truth, the Home Secretary doesn't even know how many asylum seekers may eventually have to be sent here. It could be many thousands, but Home Office officials are quietly hoping that just like the Australian initiative against the small boats, once they finally start relocating asylum seekers, the people smugglers' business model will be broken. It's a big gamble, and this country is a vital component.
And Mark White joins us live from Kigali this morning. Good morning to you, Mark. Look, interesting to hear that there could be some movement from the ECHR, very much what the Home Secretary will be hoping for. How realistic is that?
Well, we've seen so many opportunities that the government feel that they can push through to get this policy underway, and those opportunities have been knocked back by, of course, the European Court, also multiple appeals to courts in the UK as well. What has been happening is that UK officials have been talking to officials at the European Court in Strasbourg in light of the illegal migration bill that is working its way through Parliament, which will effectively allow the British government to take less notice of that controversial Rule 39. It's quite complex, but it's effectively an opportunity for people to appeal if they feel their human rights are being infringed, and for the court, if they are persuaded by the argument, to issue an injunction, which could then be very difficult, of course, for the British government. They want also the European Court in Strasbourg to take account of the fact that the High Court here in the UK in December ruled that the policy was lawful, that the Court of Appeal over in the UK, of course I'm in Kigali, could also rule within the next couple of months that that policy is lawful. So we'll see what happens in the fullness of time. But Suella Braverman also told me in that sit-down interview with her that, you know, she was still willing to contemplate moving away from the ECHR, pulling out of the agreement altogether if they continue to block the British government's policy of sending asylum seekers here to this country.
Mark, thank you very much. And a reminder, you can see Mark's full exclusive interview with the Home Secretary at 9:30 right here on GB News.
Boris Johnson set to face a grilling this week over comments he made to Parliament about lockdown parties in Downing Street. He submitted evidence in his defence, which will be published today, and claims the inquiry is unlawful and biased. Joining us for more, our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood. Tom, so he's going to have a say starting today.
He is. Now, this is, firstly, a pretty substantial dossier that's been compiled by Boris Johnson's lawyers. It includes his defence, but also a huge amount of evidence with regard to backing up that defence, WhatsApp messages and the like. And we've all been very used to reading internal WhatsApp messages over the last few weeks, but we're going to get some more this afternoon. And this is all, of course, in preparation for his long grilling on Wednesday afternoon, not just of Harriet Harman, who has stepped in to temporarily chair this investigatory committee, but also by Bernard Jenkin, who, of course, is on the Tory side and also a very long-standing member of Parliament. So we will be able to see Boris Johnson in the flesh with his verbal defence on Wednesday, but this afternoon we'll be able to read some of that defence as well.
OK, and it's likely to be what's the word I'm looking for, a very passionate defence from the former Prime Minister, because, of course, he still has big political ambitions, and if this all goes wrong on Wednesday, it could arguably end up in him a by-election in his constituency.
The process by which that would happen would be the committee recommends a 10-day suspension from the House. Now, that is the threshold by which a by-election can be triggered if a proportion of Boris Johnson's constituency were to then petition for that by-election. So it's a few-stage process. What would have to happen is the committee would have to recommend a 10-day suspension, the House of Commons would have to then vote for that 10-day suspension, and then the people of Uxbridge and South Ruislip would then have to petition for a by-election, and then a by-election would have to happen, and Boris Johnson could, of course, stand in that by-election, and if he were to lose, he would then leave Parliament. That's a many-stage process, and we're nowhere down that road so far, just at the very beginning. And of course, Boris Johnson this is not assessing whether or not Boris Johnson broke the rules in Downing Street. This is assessing whether or not he materially, knowingly and fundamentally misled Parliament in what he said. Now, there are many different arguments that can be had here, and one of Boris Johnson's strongest arguments that he'll be putting forward in this dossier today are the messages that he received from civil servants telling him he did not break the rules, telling him that there were workplace exemptions in place. Now, if Boris Johnson can turn to this committee and say, I stood up in Parliament, I stood at that dispatch box saying these words on the advice of my civil servants, that I did not break the rules, and I said that in good conscience at the time, thinking that is what happened. Now, it turns out later that that may not have been correct, and clearly the Metropolitan Police has found that in one instance Boris Johnson did, in their view, break the rules. But that's not what's being assessed. What's being assessed is whether or not he knew he was breaking the rules materially. And that's a more difficult charge to prove.
Well, it's going to be a popcorn at the ready kind of week, isn't it, in Westminster? Whether or not you're into politics or not, Boris Johnson always commands a big audience. Tom, thank you very much indeed.
At the time, 12 minutes past 8. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories. The Home Secretary has said she's prepared to change the law to expel rogue officers in the Metropolitan Police. Suella Braverman acknowledged it's very difficult for chief constables to get rid of officers who she says fall short.
The average price of a home in the UK has jumped almost £3,000 in March. The property website Rightmove says this was driven by an increase in asking prices, spiking almost £8,000 on average. Rightmove's chief executive described the current market as unsustainable.
An emergency alert will be sent to mobile users across Britain next month to test a new public warning system. It's to make people aware of potentially life-threatening situations, including flooding and wildfires. The siren-like alert will be sent on St George's Day, 23rd of April, and users won't be able to use their phones until they acknowledge it. So you don't know what's coming, your pocket starts vibrating and a siren goes off. And this is just to test that you're getting the message. And you can't use your phone if you don't answer it.
It's coming on the 23rd
Sounds worse to me than any threat.
April.
Now, talking about an amazing story was going to resonate with so many of you about a lady called Bianca Austin. She's the wife of the former England striker Charlie Austin. I don't think Charlie Austin was an England striker.
He's in Swindon now, isn't he?
Yes, he was in the England squad. He wasn't. I don't think he played for England. But anyway, Charlie's a footballer. He's played for a lot of clubs, including Southampton. And this has sparked debate on Twitter after praising her daughter for punching a bully in the face. She actually said, after numerous phone calls to the school and nothing changing, today when being called names, my daughter finally punched the bully in the face. Proud mum, she said.
So we're asking this morning, is violence the answer when it comes to beating the bullies? We're joined to discuss this with the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, who says the only way to beat them is to stand up to them, and the broadcaster and life coach Fahima Mohammed, who believes you have to be able to rise above it. Welcome to both of you.
OK. Have you ever got your punch in first, Dawn?
Yes, I have. And look, you know, the first line should always be to diffuse the situation, to use humour, to go down the official route. But if none of that works, then I'm sorry, but what this young lady did, she's 16, she's studying for her GCSEs, there is no other option. I mean, I was taught as a kid to stand up for myself, and sometimes that really is the only option. So The girl did this, the school had done nothing, so she punched her bully in the face. The bullying stopped, so the victim's anxiety stopped. She can now study for her GCSEs. But the awfulness of this story is she was the one that was punished for standing up for herself against the bully, whilst the bully got away with it and was allowed to carry on in class.
She was expelled from school for 2 days.
For 2 days, yes, exactly.
Right.
For standing up for herself.
That, of course, Fahima Mohammed, is the risk if you do take to violence in all of this. It might be the only way to defeat your bully, but it will have consequences.
Absolutely. I don't think that we should not stand up for yourself, but I think the way in which you stand up needs to be considered. You need to have more than an average mind and a smart way of dealing with it, because this is your future way of dealing with conflict. And also we are putting, youth into the real world to understand that violence is never the answer. Yes, we should tackle this where the schools are obviously going to be taken into consideration as to why this was not actually taken seriously, because we know the Department of Education have these policies in this country where bullying is taken very seriously. So at the end of the day, I think parents and authorities need to actually come down on the schools, because we are teaching our future generations as to how to deal with these kind of circumstances. And when you want to condone something, you don't act upon it in the same way just because it's coming from your side.
But you can understand, can't you, how as a mother, Bianca would be incredibly frustrated to see her daughter coming home day after day being the victim of bullying and just saying to her, well done, when she has done something about it. You can understand the temptation of a protective mother.
Absolutely. But again, you're sending a message to your, child that when they go out into the real world, how are they going to deal? Because there are consequences, and the older you get, the consequences are much more detrimental. So we need to teach them different skills, and skills that it is within the law of the land, so that they actually do not get themselves into trouble, because there are, statements and there are policies and things in place in order for them to actually deal with this, where they actually can get to the core sort of issues and deal with both the bully as well as the victim.
But the problem with that, Fahima, is they're not working. 40% of young people have been bullied in the last 12 months. And if you read through the list of things you are supposed to do if you're being bullied at school, it's, you contact the governors, complain to the local authority. This is all very slow, laborious stuff and often doesn't get acted on. And if you are in the middle of studying for your exams, you need something to... Look, I'm not condoning violence in any way, shape or form. It's always a last resort. And sort of in my incident, I was 10 years old and the lad was trying to bully me over goofy teeth.
What?
Which he had goofy teeth as well, and I think that's why he was trying to deflect it on me. But I punched him in the face. It stopped instantly. And I met him years later on in life, and we discussed it, and we're good friends. And he said he learnt a valuable lesson then. I mean, we were only 10. Obviously, when you're 20-something and in the workplace, you can't go around punching people.
Yeah.
So you do have to find ways of diffusing that situation. Now I try and use humour, obviously unsuccessfully most of the time. But, I can honestly say, touch wood, I've never been bullied since that day. And I hate bullying. I really hate it. But all the official things, Fahim was right, of course, you should try and sort it out with the school. But it just doesn't seem to be working.
I think parents need to be a bit more forceful. I think a lot of the times we're not actually putting ourselves out there to actually justify why these things are not being done. That's the reason why it's being, not sort of upheld. I think we need to be a lot more tougher as parents to deal with it. We do not get ourselves involved. I personally am a parent. I do get myself involved in the schools. A lot of times they say that in primary school it's easier, in secondary school it's not. But no, I am willing to do that. So they know who I am, who's my kids, and at the same time my kids are taught different skills in order to combat this and also come to trusting adults, because they are meant to be protected at the end of the day. They need to go to the authorities to be able to deal with this, because it can escalate instead of de-escalating the situation. Yeah. And nowadays, this could actually lead to extreme where there are rivalries. Well, it won't actually de-escalate the situation when
it's
you
often
confront
the
it that
parents that are the worst protagonists in all of this, because as soon as it goes to them, they know their rights, and whether their junior was responsible for it or not, they will stick up. The people will be blind. They'll have blind spots about this. My junior couldn't have done that, couldn't possibly have done that.
No, you have to be fair, obviously. I'm always inside of the schools, and I always try to be balanced, because at the end of the day, we are teaching our young children how to get out into the real world. And as much as we want to bubble wrap them and protect them,
but wait a minute, the
we
real
cannot
world
do
is
that.
Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine.
Not
Maybe
everywhere,
somebody should have
no.
stood up to him.
Of course, but at the same time, I think it starts with the young and the little people that have these kind of voices at the end of the day. You cannot just say that, you know, and make it like everyone is under the same sort of brush. At the same time, we have to stand up and do certain things, and we have, the systems are in place for us to be able to do this. But we don't take advantage of it.
Yes, but they take a long while to click
Not necessarily. When you get a group of mothers together or parents together generally, and you make a noise, just like how you would on Twitter, but you go out to the schools and do that.
A lot of parents will make a
done.
noise by going to the police. What do you think about getting the police involved in these things?
If it's serious, then yeah, why not? Because at the end of the day, you know, there are obviously psychology sort of, you know, reasons and theories behind why this happens. And it does start from maybe they are, you know, not treated well at home, they bullied themselves, they come from backgrounds where they actually need the extra assistance. So it's not just also helping the victim, it's helping the persecutor, because they actually come from a certain type where they may be in need of that kind of assistance. So we're not just helping and assisting the victim, we're also trying to maybe, you know, make better sort of choices for people that are not actually there, you know, making those choices.
Dawn, I don't know where this incident happened, where Bianca's daughter was at school, but certainly as a parent of children in London, I would be nervous about my child physically squaring up to someone, because you never know if that could escalate. I mean, we've got a huge knife crime problem in the capital here, I think in other cities as well.
Of course.
It could easily escalate.
Of course it could, and you have to be very aware of that. And, you know, in an ideal world, the systems that are in place would work, but the problem is they're not working. And you have to be very careful now about knife crime, because, you know, I'm talking about when I was a kid, kids didn't carry knives.
Yeah.
You know, you could punch someone in the face and you'll get a punch back, you know, if you were unlucky, and that was it. But now kids are calling. So you do have to be very careful. And, you know, like Eamonn, I just want the systems to work, but they're quite clearly not. Because 80% of people in work say they've been bullied in work. So, you know, the children that are being bullied, you know, and the situation isn't getting better when you go to work either.
Do you know, I have a theory, because, you know, there's often the argument that the kids who are bullying have got problems at home, that they're from there's problems going on. The more I go through this parenting journey and the way I see some parents doing a really bad job, the more I understand bullying in the workplace. I think there's a whole generation of damaged adults walking
there's
around.
Psychology behind it, absolutely.
I really do think
there definitely is. I'm studying that at the
moment,
moment, and my master's with regards to human behaviour. And at the same time, there is definitely some sort of like connection with regards to how you are in your environment. Even
happy people don't hurt people.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, there's also the neurodevelopmental sort of, you know, sort of lacking with certain individuals when they are at a particular age and they don't have the understanding, they don't have that sort of like, you know, mentorship.
I think
so
Eamonn's
they
got a very good point
that.
about the parenting, though. It's like, you know, back in our day, if you were bullying someone at school, you know, your mum or dad wouldn't go to the school and say, my little Johnny's an angel, you know, you'd have to, you know. My dad would give me a clip round the ear, march me up the school and literally insist I was suspended or I've had some punishment. There's a different now, the attitude that parents have towards children misbehaving. It's like, you know, parents are often very aggressive to teachers.
I was told
Sometimes
if they hit you, hit them harder.
Hit them harder and then run faster.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
But you know, now if there's an incident at school, I got a call from my head teacher recently. My son had been the victim of something, but they wouldn't tell me the names of the children involved because they didn't want me to take action as a parent against the other parents or indeed that child. It's funny, the systems that are in place are really quite robust now. And I guess you can understand, because you do get these people that take it into their own hands, these aggro parents.
Well, parents can get involved. You can be part of the governing board. If you really want to be interested, you can. It's that we don't. And only when there's a problem, then only that we want to make, you know, and have a voice. So you have to take steps from the beginning. If you are raising children, you need to be involved in their lives.
So if your child was being bullied at school and they struck back, you would be ashamed of your child?
I won't be ashamed. I would understand. But at the same time, I would not accept that. I would actually say that there were better choices. And obviously, my kids personally, they do martial arts, so they know how to defend themselves. So then we have to assess it.
So you wouldn't say well done?
I wouldn't say well done.
Isabel?
I think if someone is attacking them in a physical situation, then that's OK to defend yourself. But I wouldn't encourage my children to go up in a peaceful situation and be the instigator.
I think it's more dangerous.
Well, if it happened to my child, I would say, well done.
Well done. Yeah, absolutely.
That's a score draw. That's a score draw at the end of that. 2-2. Thank you very much indeed, guys. Your views, very, very welcome in all of this. There it is on screen. GB Views at gbnews.uk.
Wasn't a score draw last night with Fulham, was it?
No, thankfully it wasn't.
Right.
No.
Multiple red cards.
Red card.
In 40 seconds.
So we're going to be discussing that. Fulham's red card missed They imploded last night, giving Manchester United their rightful place in the FA Cup semi-final at Wembley, with Paul Coit next.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway, Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lots of emails coming in on bullying. Just read them quickly. This is coming from Sean. In 1971, my best school friend was bullied. I'm not violent, but the teachers did nothing. So the bully got my right hook punch. I got the cane, but the bully never came near us again. Always stand up to bullies, Dad said. And then quickly, this one from, I haven't got a name, Elaine. I have adoptive kids with Asperger's who were bullied relentlessly by kids and adults alike. But the minute they reacted, they were the ones who were demonised.
Yeah, that is the case. But think of the satisfaction in landing that punch. 8:30 is the time still to come of the programme today.
As new footage shows the horrifying conditions that beagles are bred for lab testing are kept in. At 8:45, we'll speak to Downton Abbey actor and activist Peter Egan, who's backing the campaign to end animal testing.
Just after 9, Gloria Del Piero will be here giving us her take on Suella Braverman's push to make the government's Rwanda plan work. And you can join in, usual way, get in touch, take part in all of that after 9. Here's your back pages this morning, and Fulham's FA Cup dream gone in 40 seconds. This is in the Star. The Cottagers saw 3 red cards in under a minute as their side imploded against Manchester United. Thumbs up, says the Mirror, as the Gunners give Palace a bloody nose. Not that we're encouraging that. Arsenal sit 8 points clear at the top of the league. Sun says sack him. Tottenham manager Antonio Conte facing a player revolt after a scathing rant in a news conference at the weekend. Paul Coit here to take those stories that bit further. First of all, the United match.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sitting as a supporter thinking we're not going to get a result here. This is not going to work. And then Mr. Mitrovic and Willian and De Silva, everybody all get involved.
And literally, it was in the space of 40 seconds, wasn't it? And it was all Fulham's. Fulham were fantastic. And it all goes down to... It began with a handball. So Willian pushes the ball away. It was a red card. There's no doubt about that.
OK, he didn't overly object about that. No one's really arguing about that except his manager.
That's right.
Who then gets sent off for that. But then Mitrovic.
Now Mitrovic... Now, this is an interesting one as well, because... People say, oh, he pushed him, he did this. Well, what actually happened is that he ran up to the referee. He'd seen... Well, he was about to see red anyway. So he goes up to the referee, and Chris Kavanagh, and pulls his shoulder to obviously speak to him. You can't touch a referee. You know... I
don't agree with your interpretation there. I mean,
well, I'm not done. I'm not even done yet. So he pulls him round. Then, now, this is the point where... It's definitely a red card, because then he does get a bit pushy and he's right in his face and extremely intimidating. Yeah. So absolutely a red card, and I thought Chris Kavanagh handled it very well. Yeah. Just step back, just let it calm down a little bit. But Marco Silva, the manager, had already been sent off in between that because he was complaining whilst the referee was looking at the screen. Yeah. So absolutely no question it was a red card. It's just how long the ban's going to be.
So the semi-finals to be played at Wembley, they now line up as... Brighton against Manchester United and Manchester City against Sheffield United.
So it could be the first ever all-Manchester FA Cup final. Never happened before. And odds are on it happening, although Brighton are looking very good. So Brighton against Manchester United, who beat Grimsby, and Harry the Haddocks were all deflated afterwards, and so they've been thrown away. But Grimsby had a good run, and Sheffield United with a great game against Blackburn. So Man City against Sheffield United, so that happens next month. Yeah,
and the Arsenal march goes on and on.
Yeah, 8 points clear now at the top of the Premier League. So, excuse me, they are just continue. But... They do get to play Crystal Palace. They play Crystal Palace. Patrick Vieira, I mean, it would have been the perfect homecoming for him, but he got fired. They now have no manager, and it looks like there's a possibility that Roy Hodgson could come back and try and...
How old is he?
I think he's 97 years old now. It's incredible. He's been in football for so long. He's got to be 73, 74 now?
I think he's 75.
Yeah. Well, it's... He could well come back, and it's his boyhood club. It's the club he loves, so they could bring him back and try and save things. But they started off so well, but they are in free fall. So now they're in trouble.
Antonio Conte, Tottenham manager, his team threw away a lead to end up drawing. Who was it, Southampton?
It was Southampton.
And he gives off, and here's what he said. Have a look.
Now, until now, I try to hide the situation, but now no, because I repeat, I don't want to see what I have seen today, because this is unacceptable. Also for the respect for the fans. They follow us, pay the tickets, and to see the team another time, to have this type of performance, for me, I repeat, this is unacceptable.
Get the message, yeah.
Incandescent. He was livid. So he comes out to the press conference, 10 minutes this ran. Now, if we look deeper into this, is this a situation, because it looks like Conte's going to go at the end of the season, is this a man, A, that wants to get fired, so we'll start slugging everybody off and having to go at the players, or is there that strange thing that possibly he's going to try and get a tune out of the players, but these days that doesn't work. I mean, these millionaires, and, you know, they're very most delicate of flowers, a lot of professional footballers these days. If you go out there and start giving it the hairdryer treatment, I don't think that's going to work. So he's going to lose the respect of his players. And also the fans are now looking at it thinking, what on earth is going on? I like a manager that wears his heart on his sleeve. I always like the fact that he would say what he thinks, but it was really out there. really out there on Saturday.
Paul, thank you very much indeed. Appreciate it. The time now, 25 to 9.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be discussing the online sale of knives and machetes as Amazon bosses face prosecution. Charlie Rowley and Nicky Hodgson have the papers next.
Thanks.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Coming up to 20 to 9.
8:39, time to go through the papers for the final time this morning with the former Special Advisor to Michael Gove, Charlie Rowley, and the author Nicky Hodgson. Charlie, let's start with this Amazon story that we were teasing a little bit earlier. This is a plan to prosecute people who sell zombie knives and machetes. Sounds very sensible.
You're absolutely right, and it's Keir Starmer's big speech apparently billed for Thursday. Now, how much coverage that'll get on the back of Boris Johnson's appearance on Wednesday as part of the Partygate committee, so that might be shifted. But currently, there's a plan on Thursday to make this a keynote speech as part of the Labour manifesto. And so, if Labour came into power, they would be going back to, as we talked about earlier with John McTernan, probably 1997 policies of being tough on crime, being tough on the causes of crime. But this is a particular policy which ensures that online dealers, particularly like Amazon, face huge fines and prosecutions for selling knives. These zombie knives, these aren't small weapons, these are machetes and awful weapons that are in the hands of criminal gangs
Charlie,
across
just
the
let
country.
me understand this. Is this like the Twitter platform, that the knives can be placed on the Amazon platform, or does Amazon make the deliberate decision to stock and sell these things?
So they are on the Amazon site. They are stocked. They are sold. But of course, it's the key number of the issue is the sell to under 18-year-olds, and it's getting into.
But there's no excuse for it.
That...
It's like another thing. There's just no excuse for this. You don't have to sell this. You're a hugely profitable company. Why does anybody need to sell a zombie knife or a machete?
Exactly, and that's why the onus is on the company. It's a bit like the online harms bill, making sure that online social media companies are protecting people that are on social media. They will have the burden placed upon them, and so will Amazon when it comes to selling.
Imagine if Amazon was selling guns in the States. I mean, you know, knife crime in this country is America's gun crime, right? And it just shouldn't be allowed, and it wouldn't be allowed in the States with guns.
Exactly.
It seems a very straightforward, easy suggestion. But interesting to see Labour becoming kind of the party of law and order, or trying to bill themselves as that, aren't they? And that clear blue water that everyone talks about narrowing between the left and the right on a lot of issues.
Exactly, and we're seeing as a couple of other stories that we've talked about already when it comes to antisocial behaviour. These are real things that people care about in this country. They want to see a tougher stance taken, and that's what Labour are trying to get ahead on in this case here.
Well, here's a great story. A dad who took events into his own hands. Luton Airport is the venue. Wizz Air is the airline. He was due compensation. They wouldn't pay it. What did he do?
He sent the bailiffs in. It's very imaginative, and it's funny, but there's obviously a serious point to this. You know, there were so many airlines, and Wizz Air's got, unfortunately, not very good reputation in terms of cancelling flights. A dad who'd booked for him and his family to go away decided that, they hadn't responded to his complaints quick enough. So what he did, quite interestingly enough, was phone up some bailiffs, send them to the Wizz Air desk in Luton Airport, and demand what was rightly his, and they shortly paid up afterwards.
And if they hadn't have stumped up, he threatened what?
He threatened further legal action.
To seize the airplane, to seize the aircraft.
Oh, yes, well, yes, that.
I'd like to see them try. It's not an easy thing to do.
I don't know how he would have orchestrated that bit. It seems easy to send the bailiffs in. I'm not sure how you get a
But it's interesting, a lot of airlines act as a law unto themselves. I mean, they put you on call centre calls that go on forever and ever. You give up the will to live. And they can, Ryanair will flaunt laws.
They oversell the seats. They sell you a seat that's already sold to somebody, routinely. So, it's quite novel, but, good story.
Charlie, this is interesting. A story about divorces. Obviously, we've had the quickie divorce brought in under Boris Johnson, and now a plan to change or shake up asset-splitting divorces. I wonder if this is another Boris legacy or just being a bit flippant. This is in the Times, page 8.
That's absolutely right. And it's currently the case that if you get divorced in this country, that your assets are divided between the equal partners. It's not something that happens anywhere else, it seems, and particularly in Europe. If you are the beneficiary or the owner or the breadwinner, you actually get to keep most of that. You don't have to divide it up. It seems to be in this country that you do. And there's been a various or varied application of the law amongst judges. So some judges have been more lenient than others. Some have been more on the side of one party or other. So it's a review taking place looking at the Matrimonial Causes Act 1973 for the lawyers out there that want to look into it. And it's making sure that actually we have a situation that becomes fair in this country, but also stops people going to London to actually find those legal services where the lawyers seem to win rather than any of the parties.
I was going to say, at the moment, it's a bit of a winner for London. Why would anyone want to stop it? It's attracting divorce business into the capital.
Exactly, and it's about making sure that if you're a wealthy couple, then obviously you will go to London and you'll get the best lawyers to get the best deal, to have those assets shared, or to take as much of that asset if you think that's the fairest thing, whatever you think is fair. But if you've got the money, you'll come to London, you'll get the best lawyers. Obviously, you can't do that everywhere across the country. And, of course, people don't have huge amounts of savings to go to the courts. So it's making sure that the application of the law is divided up fairly.
The one thing I would say about it, Charlie, that for women's rights, it's actually quite worrying because, as a woman, if you give up work to look after a baby, I'm here today, but I'm not working the rest of the time, you are reliant often on a male partner's income, salary, assets. Lots of people don't have a mortgage in joint names, all those kinds of things. So my concern would be women who take time out to look after children may be unfairly penalised by, potentially protecting financial assets in favour of men.
OK.
Yeah, well, that was my concern reading it as well, actually. And, you know, obviously the budget last week addressing for the first time that childcare help should start at 9 months, not at 3 years.
Absolutely.
Because so many women simply cannot go back to work after they have children because it doesn't pay. And this does feed into that story, I think.
Yes, very much.
Let's stay on the topic of parenthood. The Times, page 4. Women at risk of dying in childbirth while pregnant will be treated at a new network. Tell us about this network.
Yeah, so in the past kind of year, we've had these quite shocking statistics come out, although they're not actually reported in this piece, about the number of women that still die either when they're pregnant or during childbirth. What's important to say is that they're not dying of childbirth or obstetric complications themselves. They tend to die of undiagnosed or unnoticed preconditions, so things like mental health issues, preeclampsia, blood clotting, things like that. And so, you know, there were some terrible, terrible statistics that came out of Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital a couple of years ago for maternal deaths. And this is the NHS saying what we need to do is have these specialist centres and we've got to tackle this death rate. It's unacceptable in a developed country in the Western world. So this is what these centres are going to be doing, and they'll be looking at things like you know, diabetes, psychiatric illness, blood clotting, and aiming to bring the numbers of people that die needlessly down.
Well, it sounds like a great idea, but, I mean, we've got a shortage of midwives. We've got midwives leaving the sector in their droves. Is it going to happen? Is it practicable?
Well, that's the problem. I mean, the point is that at the minute, if you go to A&E as a pregnant woman, there's often a doctor who has never dealt with anybody in pregnancy before, so you're kind of not getting the care anyway at this point. You know, so something has to be done, but it's always the same problem with the NHS. Where's the money coming from?
In 1 minute, give us the situation with UBS and Credit Suisse. This in the Financial Times, Charlie.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And it's a warning, I think, just to everybody to be aware of just how fractured the global economy is still, how the economy is still... a lot of work needs to be done in the UK. But essentially, Credit Suisse has been bought out by UBS, the biggest bank in Switzerland. It's allowed lenders to have their... the money that was being lent to them protected, but it may come at a cost of over 11,000 jobs with that merger, 11,000 jobs in London for those that work at UBS and Credit Suisse that could be at risk in the City of London.
I mean, I can't imagine 11,000 jobs being lost, perhaps a fraction of those, but it goes beyond the job loss, does it not? It's about everybody's concern about a perhaps contagion within the sector.
Exactly, and I think that's, as I said before, just how fractured that the global economy is. And, you know, it's been welcomed by, obviously, the Federal Reserve in the US, by the Bank of England, by the Bank of Japan. Everybody has welcomed this takeover in order to protect the global economy. But it's just a warning to everybody that we still need to be aware of just how fractured the global economy is.
Yeah, well, the Bank of England is saying the UK banking system is well capitalised and funded and remains safe and sound, trying to reiterate that point loud and clear. Nikki, let's end on Blossom on pause after the recent cold snap, and if the stars to be believed, there's more coldness on the way.
Yeah, so it's kind of good news, actually. So don't worry about the blossom, basically. The blossom is going to come. It will flower in April. It's just postponed. It's not cancelled. And if you do start to see blossom out and about, you can tweet pictures of it with the hashtag BlossomWatch. And to
but
share,
what if things have
joy.
already blossomed? Will the cold weather not damage those?
No, apparently not.
Right.
It'll kind of... They'll be dead for a little while and then come back, so, yeah.
What type of blossom are out there? There's apple blossom, there's cherry blossom,
And
there's...
sneeze. Not sure.
Sneezy
I'm allowed to sneeze. Just count me.
Oh, yeah, is that it? Apple or cherry? Is there anything else?
There must be some season, indeed. But you know what? One place where they've got their cherry blossom is Tokyo. Apparently it's out in force over this weekend. The picture's incredible. If you get a chance, have a look at those.
Charlie and Nikki, thank you both very much indeed. Lovely having you here today. Come back and see us again sometime. Thank you. Campaigners are calling for an independent hearing and a ban on animal testing after horrifying footage emerged showing inhumane conditions inside a beagle puppy farm.
Yeah, celebrities including Ricky Gervais and the conservationist Chris Packham have united together to launch the Operation Beagle campaign, which has already been backed by 110 MPs.
Well, the actor Peter Egan, who narrated the new footage, has said it's one of the saddest things he's ever done, a warning that some of you may find scenes from the film upsetting.
A single dog stands up to say, "I know the camera is there." Another cries out for help, alerting the whole pack. All the dogs sense that there is someone near and they can try to ask for help. One takes his post by the door. Standing on his hind legs, he says, Notice me. Notice us. We need to get out of here.
Well, to go into depth in this, let's speak to Peter Egan, who is an actor and an animal activist and who narrated that film. Good morning, Peter. And also veterinary surgeon and scientific consultant of Operation Beagle, Dr. Andre Menache.
Good morning to you both. Look, it's unbelievable. We've talked about this very horrible situation on the programme before. Still, nothing has changed. Peter?
Yes, well, it's absolutely devastating, as you can see from that film. These poor beagles, they are the most human-friendly companions, and they are chosen because they are so human-friendly and stoical, and they endure. They're sold at 16 weeks with no enrichment, having lived in a very hermetically sealed situation that's absolutely appalling, as you could see from the film. And then they have 90 days of testing without anaesthetic. It's absolutely horrendous. And the results of this testing are negligible. There's a 90% failure rate on anything that comes out of this. And 10% is accidental anyway. It's totally unnecessary. It is absolutely incredibly cruel, as you can see. And, you know, these dogs are just beautiful and they deserve better.
You know, as a doctor there, you're the scientific consultant for this whole Operation Beagle. The defence will be they are preventing disease, they're preventing certain products that we have in everyday life reacting badly with human beings. It's necessary to test animals. What would your answer be to that?
I would say that about 30 years ago, perhaps we didn't have anything better. But today, the 21st century technology that is available is far more reliable and far more predictive of human outcome and human reaction to drugs than animal testing. I mean, just to be blunt, we could replace animal testing today, but two things need to happen. The first is that the public needs to ask their local MPs to support EDM 278, which calls for a rigorous public scientific hearing onto the whole subject. The second thing that needs to happen is for shareholders in the pharmaceutical industry to be made aware of the avoidable animal suffering taking place today, and the fact that the pharmaceutical industry is dragging its feet and not applying the 21st century technology that is crying out to be used.
Talk about animal suffering, and we're seeing faces of cute little loving dogs looking at the camera here. What do you mean by suffering? Do you mean death? Andre?
Let's bring in Peter. I think we've lost our line to Andre.
Andre, can you hear me? OK, sorry, that was a bad line there. Peter, in answer to that question, I don't know if you heard it. I mean, explain the suffering that these animals undergo.
Well, they go on, they have 90 days of force feeding for toxicity testing, and they have no anesthetic. It's absolutely awful. It's painful and distressing. And after 90 days, they're killed.
I was going to just read out the comment from MBRA, because they didn't comment on this particular report. They haven't spoken since 2021, but this was their defence. They say animal welfare is our top priority. The UK has the most demanding regulations in the world. Our work results in dogs that are healthy and well habituated for their vital role of preventing and treating greater suffering. But you say that that simply is not the case.
Well, as you can see from the film, and I've seen a much longer film, which I've narrated 8 minutes, you have these dogs, they are hermetically sealed, taken away from their mothers too early. As you can see, the detritus on the floor is absolutely disgusting. They're never allowed outside because there is a fear of contamination. So they are kept hermetically sealed. with no enrichment at all. It's a form of torture, in my opinion. And as Andre has said, all for nothing. It's making money for the people who breed, for MBR Acres, who breed these poor beagles, and they sell them for £2,000 a time to labs. They breed in this one centre here, 2,000 dogs a year. They're making lots of money, and it is absolutely unnecessary, and it's cruel.
Andre, why beagles? Why do they breed and sell beagles?
Beagles are about the most docile breed of dog that you can find. If you or I were to keep dogs cooped up 24/7, we'd probably never be allowed to own another dog. Beagles were bred as hunting dogs. They need to run or walk at least 5 miles a day to be happy and healthy.
Yeah, it's a very, very sad situation overall. Peter, what is your plea as we leave this now? And we've talked about this before. It still continues, as Isabel says. What is going to change things? What is your plea to people watching or listening today?
Well, I would ask all the viewers watching and listening to visit the operationbeagle.org website, where they can find the actions that will lobby government officials for our science hearing to support the EDM 278, which Andre mentioned earlier on.
Brilliant. Well, listen,
it's very, very important that the public remain active. It's very important that the public isn't passive.
Yeah, 110 MPs have done so. Chris Packham, the TV conservationist, and Ricky Gervais, as well as you, have already done so. And as you say, Operation Beagle, you can find that online. Peter Egan, Dr. Andre Menache, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us this morning.
Coming up, our Home and Security Editor Mark White live from Kigali in Rwanda as Suella Braverman signals a breakthrough on deportation flights.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Hello, I'm Michael Portillo. You can join me every Sunday on GB News. Remember to subscribe to the GB News YouTube channel and to download the GB News app to stay up to date with the latest GB News content. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
European judges are on the brink of backing down over deportation flights as the Home Secretary claims Rwanda is ready to take thousands.
Hello there, very good morning to you. It's 9:01, Monday the 20th of March. You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel. Thanks for your company.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. Suella Braverman has suggested she's close to a breakthrough with the European Court of Human Rights that could see deportation flights taking off to Rwanda by the summer. Our Home and Security Editor Mark White will bring us an exclusive interview with the Home Secretary.
Boris Johnson will argue today that the inquiry into whether he misled Parliament over lockdown parties is biased and unlawful. The former PM has submitted evidence in his defence ahead of a grilling by MPs on Wednesday.
UBS will take over its struggling rival Credit Suisse in a bid to avert a financial crisis. The deal was made just hours before markets opened, with the Bank of England welcoming the takeover.
Donald Trump has urged his supporters to launch mass protests as he reveals he expects to be arrested tomorrow. His former Vice President Mike Pence has come to his defence, claiming any arrest would be politically motivated.
And the Princess of Wales has shared a new picture of her family to mark Mother's Day. The photograph shows Catherine sitting in a tree with her children.
There's a rhyme about that, you and me sitting in a tree, isn't there?
K-I-S-S-I-N-G.
What was that?
I don't know, maybe not.
No, maybe. You wish. Get in touch the usual way, gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Right, to our top story this morning. European judges could be on the brink of backing down on their ruling that prevented migrants being sent to Rwanda.
Well, the Home Secretary said talks with the European Court of Human Rights were constructive, hinting that the first flights could take off before summer.
Well, it follows Ms Braverman's trip to Rwanda's capital, Kigali, where she claimed the country was ready to take thousands of migrants.
So we have an exclusive interview now with the Home Secretary, and she said Rwanda was a dynamic and welcoming country which would offer asylum seekers a good life.
And our Home and Security Editor has travelled to Kigali and sent us this report.
Critics have accused the Home Secretary of indulging in nothing more than a glorified photo op. And yes, of course, these are powerful images. But Suella Braverman's visit here is not just about the eye-catching symbolism. The UK government desperately needs the agreement with Rwanda to succeed. Without a third country willing to take relocated asylum seekers, the government's illegal migration bill is almost certain to stumble at the first hurdle. So a meeting with the Rwandan President Paul Kagame was on the agenda as the UK strengthens its partnership agreement. The Home Secretary certainly packed a lot into her two-day schedule, visiting new housing developments and other support services being geared up to accommodate thousands of asylum seekers who may end up here in the months ahead. The plans still have their critics, of course. TV presenter Gary Lineker, opposition politicians and others. But Suella Braverman told me no one should judge unless they've been here. Would you encourage them actually to come here and see for themselves what Rwanda has to offer those who would come here and settle?
Absolutely. I think there has been far too much prejudice, frankly, snobbery amongst the critics, who most of whom haven't even visited Rwanda. This is my third visit to Rwanda. This is a welcoming country. It's a dynamic economy. So to all of those critics who display a gross prejudice against Rwanda, I tell them to visit first and then judge.
An important stop-off for Suella Braverman was this huge tech hub in the capital, Kigali, home to hundreds of startups and companies from around the world. Rwanda is home to a burgeoning tech sector.
The Noskin Kigali house in particular has over 200 companies, startups that are stationed out of here, also organizations that support startups, and we have more than 1,000 members. Now, 55% of these are from other African countries.
The Kepler Academy, high in the hills over Kigali, another example, says the Home Secretary, of the many education services Rwanda can provide asylum seekers. This well-established, well-respected local university has already committed to ensuring up to 25% of the students enrolled here will be refugees. But like the many housing complexes around this capital city, they have absolutely no idea just how many people they'll eventually be asked to accommodate. For in truth, the Home Secretary doesn't even know how many asylum seekers may eventually have to be sent here. It could be many thousands, but Home Office officials are quietly hoping that just like the Australian initiative against the small boats, once they finally start relocating asylum seekers, the people smugglers' business model will be broken. It's a big gamble, and this country is a vital component. Mark.
Now, Mark White will have a fuller version of that interview 9:30 right after our programme on To The Point with Beverly and Andrew. Gloria Del Piero joins us now. The Home Secretary, she's put in her all behind this. She sounds very bullish, she sounds very confident. What are the chances of this succeeding?
Well, that is the big question. And I think it is important that we get a grip on this, because nobody, whatever side of the political divide you are on, wants to see people risking their lives travelling here with small children. So the crucial question is, will it work? Now, we have paid over the last year £140 million to the Rwandan government to build the infrastructure. I don't know whether this will work, or whether that money would be better spent in tackling those criminal gangs, because those people are profiting from human misery. Is there a way to spend that £140 million better? But if it works, and you know, let's be honest, the Labour government did talk about this too, about whether you could deport people while they were processing their asylum claims. Now, if you were successful, you would have been able to come into the country. That's not the same with the Rwanda scheme.
But Gloria, the £140 million that's being spent in Rwanda isn't the total the government will be spending. There will be a separate amount that will be ring-fenced that will go after these people smugglers, and money invested in France, for example, is doing exactly that.
And one hopes that it will be successful. But, you know, I think the political problem is it's 13 years now. The rhetoric and the talk from the government and the Home Secretary is incredibly tough. But actually, they've not been able to get a grip on this problem so far. Just everyone wishes them well in succeeding.
And what do you make of this ECHR possible breakthrough? Mark White, who's in Kigali this morning, urging a bit of caution with that, and believe it when I see it type of thing.
Yeah, well, she seems pretty optimistic about it, doesn't she? That she can get a deal through to say that it is legal or uphold the legality of the Rwanda scheme, but. You know, will it work? Now, just one other point, actually. I was looking on social media at some of the remarks made about this scheme, and some people were imposing a picture of Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, in front of concentration camps. And I just thought, do you know what? Whatever you think of this, say it's appalling, say it's awful, express your concern, but never compare anything to the most heinous thing that we've ever seen in our history. Nothing is comparable to that.
OK. Gloria, stay with us, because we've got some other news stories we want your opinions on. We'd appreciate that. I want to bring in Liam Halligan now, our economics editor, to talk about this This bank takeover, UBS taking over Credit Suisse. Now, last week, I thought there was a bailout with Credit Suisse and everything was okay, 80 million quid.
Yeah, that's because the authorities told us it was okay. But what else are they going to say? As Matthew Rice Davis once said, they would say that. Look, the difference between this and when...
Sorry, Liam, we're having microphone problems, so we're going to come back to you. And just a quick word to Gloria on this, because, Gloria, of course, you know, it's not just about the jobs of people who work for Credit Suisse in the capital and all of the money that brings into the UK.
Liam, it might be quicker if you go out and get your mind changed, because the time they
people up
spring
and down
into
the country
action
who'd
here.
be worried about, you know, perhaps seeing the collapse of the banking industry like 2008 all over again.
Gosh, well, you know, wages have never actually recovered in this country since that crash. I really think Liam Halligan is your man for this discussion. But we did see it in 2000. We did see that in 2008 happen in this country, and people are still living with the consequences. So of course, but I'd go to Liam Halligan and his microphone.
Well, the Bank of England at pains to say the UK banking system is well capitalised and funded and remains safe and sound. But there are, as we say, 5,000 people who work for Credit Suisse, and now in that merger with UBS in the City of London, it'll be around 11,000. Liam's microphone, I'm told, is all resolved
also safe
now.
and sound.
What do you
see Gloria and Liam getting the old band back together?
Yeah, it's like old times.
That was a bad moment for your microphone to go. Get me to talk about this.
Job losses, Liam.
Well, Credit Suisse employ 5,000 people in the City of London. I don't think most people across the country are going to worry about bankers losing their jobs, even though
it's tax revenue.
They have families, you know, they have livelihoods. A lot of people working for Credit Suisse won't be high-rolling people driving Maseratis. They'll be analysts, there'll be young people trying to make their way in a difficult world. So obviously that's worrying. But what's much more worrying, frankly, is the impact of this on the broader economy, the UK economy and the global economy. Credit Suisse is one of 30 or so systemically important banks in the world. The balance sheet of Credit Suisse is bigger than Switzerland's whole GDP, the whole Swiss economy. We had, of course, a couple of weeks ago, Silicon Valley Bank in the US with its UK subsidiary. That was taken over by HSBC. It was a kind of strong-armed, railroaded deal overseen by the Bank of England and the government. This, similarly, is a railroaded deal, but it involves a systemically important bank failing. SVB was not a systemically important bank. Credit Suisse is a systemically important bank. And I'm sorry, it brings me no pleasure to say this, but banking scares are now going to dominate the news for weeks and weeks and weeks because of this bailout, because such a massive bank like CSFB has been shown to be vulnerable, despite all the post-Lehman Brothers 2008 regulations, which we were told would make everything safer. They obviously haven't. Some of us have been banging the drum about that for many years and been derided by the financial services industry for being troublemakers. Well, it turns out the regulation probably wasn't strong enough. And as interest rates go up, the balance sheets of lots of these banks that have invested heavily in government bonds, because they were told to, frankly, again by regulators, are going to start to look weaker. We're going to hear a lot more about this, and it's the last thing people need, given that the economy is trying to recover.
Any other obvious culprits to look out for? Just to, you know, Credit Suisse might have been an obvious one.
I would never mention the name of another bank that might go bust because I'm a responsible broadcaster.
Thanks, Liam. Appreciate it. 40 minutes now past 9 o'clock. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of the stories. The Home Secretary has said she's prepared to change the law to expel rogue officers in the Metropolitan Police. Suella Braverman acknowledged it's very difficult for chief constables to get rid of officers who she says fall short.
Boris Johnson's defence against claims he lied to Parliament over Partygate could be published today. It comes as the former Prime Minister prepares to give evidence to the Privileges Committee on Wednesday.
Vladimir Putin has said that Russia is open to a diplomatic resolution to the Ukraine crisis, but says he rejects ultimatums. It comes ahead of a meeting with President Xi in Russia, with the Russian leader claiming the two countries face common threats.
Now, To the Point is coming up at 9:30. Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner are in the studio with us to tell us what is coming up on the programme today. And you've got an extended version of that interview with Suella Braverman to lead with.
Yeah, great story and good access. And looks like this Rwanda plan might actually happen.
Do you think this is true then? Because we're trying to get to the bottom of whether or not the ECHR actually might back down.
I think even if the ECHR doesn't back down, I think the government are going to say, we're going to do it anyway, which is what they did on votes for prisoners 20 years ago.
But
5 years ago.
We haven't even seen this interview yet. It is hot off the press. It's being cut as we speak. So you'll have to stay with us to see what she has to say about it.
And we're going to talk about the 20th anniversary of the Iraq War. We should never let people forget that big, big moment in our history. I think it was a disaster from start to finish. And I wonder where Tony Blair is at the moment. Can we get him on?
Yeah. We had his former advisor on this morning. We should have asked him about that. What else is coming up?
We're going to be talking about Donald Trump, of course, and the fact that he has suggested on his social media that he's going to be arrested tomorrow. This is all about the Stormy Daniels and the fact that she was paid about $120,000 by his lawyer, which he then refunded to the lawyer. So it does look a little bit like they're trying to get him on anything at the moment. So we're going to be looking at that.
He's saying protest to his supporters, which has an unfortunate echo of what happened in Capitol Hill last year, which was pretty much sedition.
Yeah, actually, Elon Musk came out saying that if he does get indicted for this, actually it'll be a landslide. He'll get the Democratic Republican nomination.
It will play into his hands.
It will play into his hands, so maybe it's not a bad thing
Poor
for Trump.
persecuted Donald.
Well, we look forward to the programme coming up in just over 10 minutes' time. Thank you both.
Thank you. And then after that, Gloria will give you her take on Rishi Sunak's antisocial behaviour plans. Could we see a return of the ASBO? Next.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
9:20, welcome back. We're still with Gloria De Piero. And Gloria, we're going to talk a little bit about the possible return of the ASBO.
And for those who don't know, an ASBO is an antisocial behaviour strategy order.
The Labour government, and I'm not sort of slavishly a defender of that government, but they were really tough on antisocial behaviour. It was really quite high up the political debate.
Then why didn't it last?
And then Cameron came in, and actually it fell massively down. It was sort of all went a bit hugger-huddy. So good that Rishi Sunak is getting tough and talking about the need to get tough on antisocial behaviour. When I was a Member of Parliament, when you have your advice surgeries, antisocial behaviour was one of those things that came up repeatedly. And I would go further, actually, because one thing that used to really, really annoy me is when, you know, an older couple would come to see me. They would say, we can't sleep because the people upstairs are playing their music all night. They don't go to sleep. We can't sleep. And, like, the council would go, oh, gosh, we need to move the elderly couple out. And I'm like, no, you have to move these people out. It's often the person who is subject to the antisocial behaviour that then is asked to sort of move on. So, actually, this is a great start, but I think we could be much tougher on it.
It's a simple thing. When I was young, I mean, we were never allowed to throw litter out the car window or anything. And if you were caught doing that, you were in trouble, right? So you learnt pretty early on, you don't throw litter down. There were just simple parental rules that then became neighbourhood rules, that then became community rules, and people stood or fall by those sort of things. It's this lack of investment in society, people feeling they don't have a connection with their neighbourhood or their...
Yeah, but most people, so you go to some of our toughest estates, and most people are actually, they have a lovely garden, they maintain their houses really, really well. It's a minority that fall foul of that and think it's acceptable to, oh, I don't want that sofa anymore, I'll just shove it on the street. Or I think that fridge is packed up, so I'll stick that outside the front. So, I mean, it really does blight communities and blight the lives of people. So let's get tough.
But Gloria, David Cameron with his hugger hoodie thing was trying to stop young people being demonised. There was this whole move to try and stop the sort of older generation turning on young people who often had a lot of problems, because it was tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime, was Tony Blair's great mantra, wasn't it? Because there are all these problems that lead to this antisocial behaviour, and is that being addressed?
You know, I don't think there's any excuse for being allowed. I don't care, you know, most people who grow up in tough circumstances don't go on to commit crime or become a nuisance in their community. It's louchish behaviour and there's no excuse for it, and get tough.
OK. Good stuff.
OK, yeah, your views on that, very welcome. Boris Johnson's going to feature politically in the news for the rest of the week.
Might be longer than the rest of the week. I just wonder if... I'm not sure Boris Johnson is done in a leading political role, you know. So, yes, on Wednesday, he will give evidence to the Privileges Committee. This is the committee approved by MPs in Parliament, which is there to determine whether he deliberately misled Parliament when he said there were no illegal gatherings.
Yeah.
It's really important to say, and I'm going to actually say that I want to... My heart goes out to those Tory MPs. This committee has a majority of Conservative MPs. It's a majority of government MPs on it. Can you imagine how difficult that is for those 4 Conservative MPs this week? Imagine if you were suddenly asked to sort of find out whether I was a good human or not, and it could cost me my political future. It's pretty tough for them too.
It's tough, but it has to be beyond party politics. It has to be beyond characters. It just has to be on what is right and wrong.
It's tough, though. It's very tough when it's one of your own, actually. But I think there's some pretty independent Conservative MPs on there. They have come under a lot of pressure, by the way, from activists to not finish Boris Johnson off. And I don't know, perhaps there's so much excitement about this that it will turn out to be a damp squib. But it's going to be a long old session, could be up to 4 hours.
Yeah, well, we're getting the dossier today, so we'll understand what his evidence or defence will be on Wednesday, a little bit later on. Expected to be publishing WhatsApp messages from senior civil servants who were advising him, telling him that it was, you know, OK to say what he said in Parliament. So is he going to be able to, as Cameron would say, the greased piglet, you know, slip through the net?
I mean, who knows? I mean, it's all to play for on Wednesday. And Boris Johnson, he does have this habit of defying the normal rules of politics. But we should say he has been fined for breaking lockdown rules.
Yeah.
So we know that he broke lockdown rules. This is about whether he misled.
And the Privileges Committee have already reported that he did on 4 occasions, but this is just the evidence-taking in-person part of it.
Yes, and we will see what's... If it was me, I don't know about you, but I thought, how would I behave if I was being dragged to this committee? I think I'd say, sorry, it was inadvertent. That would be my natural instinct. And actually, I think that would go down quite well with the public. That's just me, though.
We forgive you anything.
And I'm not making a comeback to politics.
Thanks very much, Gloria. Really appreciate it. We will say goodbye to you. We will be back tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. And we leave you with Beverly and Andrew and To The Point. Have yourselves a good day.
Very good morning. Good morning, good morning. Right, we've got a lot coming up today. It's a significant anniversary, 20 years since the Iraq War.
Yeah, a stain, I believe, on Tony Blair's career, but much more importantly, it's the state of the Middle East ever since. So we'll be talking about that to some military figures about whether it was a pointless adventure.
Yeah, absolutely. Donald Trump thinks he's going to be arrested tomorrow, in his own words. Why? There's a lot to talk about there, whether you think that is necessary or not. Do let us know. And, of course, Rwanda and Suella Braverman. She has sat down with our very own Mark White, given an exclusive interview, which we haven't even seen yet,
so we're looking forward to that, because it does look now like the Rwanda policy is going to happen. And I think we're doing a poll on it too, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. We've got a Twitter poll ready this morning to ask you, once you see these pictures of Suella Braverman in Rwanda being extremely excited about the development that's going on out there to take people from here, do you have any faith that her ambitions will now be realised? That's our GB News Twitter poll this morning.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's